Good morning, everybody. Because of time, we will just dive into the process right away. The first session of the video that we're going to go through, talk about the process, and then we move to the mock session, and we'll have question and answer after that. The important thing is I want you to watch it and listen instead of myself making presentation. We decided you'll be able to get more from watching and listening to.
With that, you for joining this session. My name is Megan.
Yeah. So this is the first one. It takes about 40 minutes, and then we'll go to the other one. But that's to illustrate how the NIH peer review process actually goes, and which is the process by which grants are reviewed, grant applications and decisions and made after the review process. And because sometimes you may have questions and say, look, does it really matter if you know somebody or if you are connected? All those loopholes are well protected against. So let's just start with this one, please.
I am the community director at NIH's Office of Extramural Research. I will be monitoring the section. I have today Dr. Sally Amaro. She's a peer review policy officer at NIH's Office of Extramural Research. With her today, so welcome to you all. We're looking at NIH peer review. This session is designed to give you the fundamentals of peer review. Immediately following this session, we have a mock study section for you, which is the topic one section, which will show you kind of peer review in action. And so we get questions in both of these sections. All right, with that, Sally.
Thank you. I'm seeing we have many messages going on here all over the country and even other countries. So welcome. We are here to explain the NIH peer review process. This is really important for you to understand. There's a lot of details that we could go into, but we just need to focus on just a few topics here. And then we will open this for a panel discussion. If we don't get to your questions, you can email any one of us, and I'm sure, I know that I won't answer your questions, but I'm sure that my colleagues will be happy to do that as well. So here's the fundamental question we're going to address in the next 45 minutes. NIH currently receives over 80,000 grant applications a year. That's an awful lot of grant applications, and all of us on this call today are involved in this process. Now, after what we're going to talk about today, only some of those applications result in grants, fellowships, cooperative agreements, or contracts. So what's going on here between the receipt of the application and funding? Well, that would be the peer review process. So grant applications submitted to the NIH are evaluated on the basis of a peer review process that strives to be fair, equitable, timely, and free of bias. So the peer review process, by and large, considered funding. And so
With that, I want to thank you for joining the director at NIH's Office of Extramural Research. Dr. Sally Amaro. She's a peer.
It's not on internet.
I'm sure that my colleagues will be happy to do that as well. So here's the fundamental question we're going to review process. The structures to equitable, timely, and free of bias. So the peer review process, by and large, dictates which applications will be considered for funding. And that is what it's the end of the. So all the five things that happen to your application after you or your institutions to submit to the NIH. How are applications evaluated? Who decides whether your application, what is the integrity, and what are your action items at the end of this session? Let's start with the first question. What happens to your application? The first stop on the application is the division of receipt and referral. This is where the application comes in after the startup. Key decisions are such as which of the NIH institute and your application for funding, and which study section will evaluate the effort of your review. Rather than going into those details, I'm going to refer you to this one. I want it really, and they this level, that is the initial peer review study level. The national library. That is equally important. And assuming that all goes well in those levels of peer review, then funding decisions are made by where your application was assigned to be considered for funding. All right, how are applications evaluated? So we're going to the next question. Scientific and technical merit of the work proposed, the overall impact that the proposed is likely to have on the field in question, appropriate inclusion and vertebrate process managed by NIH scientific review officers.
He's going to go because I don't think.
Find your SRO in perspective. Next slide. Evaluate. So the scientific review officers manage the review process, but they cannot get involved in the actual, because that would be a conflict of interest. So we bring it mostly from federal, but
the video has covered and then continue. So when applications are submitted in response to what we call RFA, request for funding and announcement, that usually comes out every week, announcing that applications are requested, for funding, and details about what the project should look like are usually provided, the type of projects that they expect. So everyone who is interested in such RFA, given your specialty, because if the RFA has to do with, for example, HIV, and that's not your specialty, it becomes difficult for you to be responsive with whatever application that you may want to submit. Once the applications are submitted, they get to NIH, and they have to be assigned to the different study sessions. There's the epidemiology, HIV, various sessions and centers that those applications will be, distributed to. After that, reviewers are assembled based on the sessions that they belong, and these are experts in their own various and different specialties. And take, for example, epidemiology session will not involve only epidemiologists, because there are some studies that may involve maybe socioeconomic or health economics and etc. So individuals with different backgrounds are assembled as members of the review panel by the study review officers. All of them are staff of NIH, and since NIH is federal government organization, they abide by strict rules. In selecting reviewers, individuals from the same institutions or who collaborate with those who have submitted the applications are regarded as not qualified to review because of bias. Or if you work in the same area as the individual submitting, and you have some conflict, you are supposed to declare conflict of interest. So you may participate in the review, but during the review of such application, those individuals will be removed from the panel. It's like, you have your Zoom and they say you go to breakout. So we'll see that in the mock session, how that is done. But before the study review date, the applications are distributed among the reviewers about 2 or 3 weeks before the date, so that they can read and evaluate the merits of the application. And then they write their reports, the summary, and score, which will be preliminary score. Then on the date of the review, everybody will come, and there are usually 3 reviewers to every application. You have reviewer number 1, reviewer number 2, reviewer number 3. Sorry, I didn't prepare slide because we were supposed to go through the video. So reviewer 1 will be the first to give the report and say, look, based on this, these are the merits, these are the weaknesses, and their criteria that you follow. You evaluate the specific aims, what they are proposing, the merit, and even the investigators also, you evaluate them. Are they qualified to actually do what they are proposing to do? And the environment, the university, will they be able to get the required support to do the project that they are proposing? And then you evaluate, the budget, the scientific reason for each specific aim also will have to be evaluated. And after that, you assign a score, which is from 1 to 9. So the lowest, the better. The better. So you don't say, you give 9 when you actually mean that this is a very good or an excellent application. No, it's the other way around. So it's 1. And usually the reviewers are advised to spread it out. At the end of the day, the panels, I told you that there are just 3 for every application. Once they ask the score for reviewer 1, reviewer 2, reviewer 3, and then they explain what they read and the merit and the weaknesses and summarize that. Then all the members in that study session will now vote. It's not an open vote. You just write your score and enter it. But then the score usually is within the range that those three have established. So let's say I say this grant, I'm giving it 3. He's giving it 5. You are giving it 1. So that's a range of 1 to 5. So all the others will have to vote within that range. But if you are allowed to vote outside of the range, but you have to declare that, okay, I'm going to vote outside the range based on what people have explained or based on my reading it. That is allowed, So that's how. But the reviewers don't get to decide who is funded or not funded. In fact, the word funding is F word, like is forbidden.
Operation.
Okay.
They are recruited on the basis of expertise. We manage their conflicts of interest. We try to balance representation on the basis of geography, gender, minorities, stature, senior, junior, and so forth, as well as their stature in the field. So in order to be a reviewer, they have to have demonstrated expertise in the field that's being reviewed. That can be done through publications, grants, recommendations, and so forth. For each application, at least 3 of those qualified reviewers are assigned to provide an in-depth assessment of the application, to provide written critiques and criterion scores. These are numerical scores given to each of the review criteria. They also provide, I'm sorry, your pictures are over my slides. They also provide preliminary overall impact scores. Now the assignments, the 3 reviewers, 3 or more, who are assigned to your application, and their conflicts of interest are strictly confidential. So you cannot find out that information unless there's been a breach of review integrity. Next slide. So at the review meeting, for each application, members with conflicts of interest are asked to leave the room. Now there are some conflicts of interest that are so severe that we would not have the reviewer on the same study section where that application is being reviewed. So either we have to remove the reviewer or we have to put the application elsewhere. But the majority of the conflicts in grant reviews are what we call out of the room, where the reviewer simply is not present for the discussion and evaluation of the particular application that's creating the conflict. The assigned reviewers, those 3 or more out of the panel assigned to the application, present the strengths and weaknesses to the rest of the panel. The eligible members, and by that we mean people without conflicts, then join the discussion. The chair of the panel summarizes the discussion. The assigned reviewers provide their final scores, and then all of the members provide final scores privately. Once the scoring is done, there are a number of other issues that the panel is asked to discuss, such as the budget, authentication of key resources, and a few others. So rather than spending a lot of time here on what happens at the study section, I'm going to invite you to stay tuned after this session to watch the live mock study section, where we have actors, we have NIH staff who are actually going to act out what a study section meeting would be like. So let's talk a little bit about the review criteria. I urge you to become familiar with the review criteria that are going to be used in evaluating your application. They're not all the same. And so it makes sense when we were in school, we would ask, What's going to be on the test? Well, it's the same thing here, but how are you going to be evaluated? One simple answer is that for all applications, the umbrella consideration, the umbrella evaluation is for overall impact. Now, overall impact is defined differently for different types of applications. For example, for research grant applications, overall impact is defined as the likelihood for the project to exert a sustained, powerful influence on the research field or fields involved. Now, obviously, that definition would not be appropriate for, say, a fellowship application, where we're talking about training and career development and things like that. So the definition of overall impact does change depending on the type of application. So how can you find out the review criteria? Well, by law, we have to provide the review criteria in Section 5 of the Funding Opportunity Announcement that you use to submit your application. So we don't change them after your applications are in. We use the review criteria stated in the Funding Opportunity Announcement. So you need to pay attention to that when you're writing your application. We talked about the fact that the review criteria can differ. For research, for example, we asked about significance, approach, innovation, investigator, and environment. Those are different for, say, fellowship applications or postdoctoral applications where we're talking about the mentor, and we're talking about the training plan and so forth. Despite all of that variability, we can boil down different categories of review criteria for all applications, and you'll see this in your funding opportunity announcement. Some criteria are called scored because each of the criteria is assigned a numerical score, a criterion score, and each of those criteria can affect the overall score for the entire application. Then there's a category that's in the middle, and these are called additional review criteria because they do not receive criterion scores, but they can affect the overall impact score. And finally, we have a category of considerations. These are the ones that are brought up in discussion after the scoring is over because they do not affect the score and they do not get individual criterion scores. I've provided some additional information in the appendix slides for you to look at later. All right, so we've talked a lot about criterion scores, overall impact scores, and let's just review the NIH scoring system. Reviewers give numerical scores. There are a few exceptions that I'll talk about in a minute. But by and large, the numerical scores range from 1, which is exceptional, to 9, which is poor. That's our range. These are whole integers, and that range is used for both the individual criterion scores and the final impact scores. And you can see the various adjectival, sorry, I just saw the comment in the chat here. Yeah, I think some of us do remember the 100 to 500 score range. An important point to make is that the criterion scores are not used in factoring or calculating the overall impact scores. The criterion scores are simply there as indicators of the assigned reviewer's emphasis, if you will. Which of the things did they think were most meritorious? Where did they find the weaknesses? But the final impact score is calculated from final impact scores given by all of the reviewers who do not have conflict. Next, please. Okay, so as I just said, all of the members who do not have conflicts vote their final impact score after the discussion has been closed. The final impact score is calculated by averaging all of the reviewers' scores multiplying by 10. So the final range of scores is from 10 through 90. Now, because we run 2,700 review meetings a year, we use a percentiling mechanism to compare the scores, shouldn't say average, to compare the scores from one study section to another. So on some reports of the outcome of review, you might see a percentile number as well. Okay, so 10 would be the highest impact, 90 is the lowest impact. Next, please. Except there is another process that we use in most of our review meetings, and this is called the streamlining process. This process was developed to allow the study sections to focus the discussion on the more meritorious applications, and really on the applications that are in between the most meritorious and the least meritorious. So the decision was made some years ago that the least meritorious applications are those that are probably not going to be considered for funding, and therefore the study sections would focus on those that are more likely to be considered for funding. Those are designated not discussed, ND, that's not North Dakota, that's a not discussed. The panel makes a decision at the beginning of the meeting about which applications will not be discussed further. But I want everyone to understand that before the study section meets, there were 3 assigned reviewers or more who provided preliminary criterion scores, preliminary impact scores, and written critiques. So it's not correct to say that they weren't evaluated. The correct designation, the correct way to think about this is that they were not discussed by the panel. I want you to emphasize also, I want you to remember that this requires the full concurrence of the entire study section. One member, one reviewer in that panel can say, I want to discuss it, and then it has to be discussed. And if it's discussed, then it gets a numerical score. There's no guarantee that once it's discussed it's going to fare any better, but that's the way this works. At the end of that process, there will be a summary statement, there will be a written outcome of the review, and for not discussed applications, those summary statements will contain the written critiques from the assigned reviewers and the criterion scores. So for these applications, the scores can range from 10 to not discussed. Okay, next slide. So the outcome of the review process for initial peer review is a final impact score, which typically is released within 3 days after the meeting is concluded. Might be sooner, but we're pretty good about that one. The summary statement is a written outcome of review with the critiques, with the criterion scores, with the bunch of codes, and those are typically released within 4 to 8 weeks after the meeting. Where can you go to find these? Check the ERA Commons, and you will find that information when it's available. Next slide, please. All right. So after, let's say peer review is done, initial peer review. Now something happens here about your points of contact at the NIH. So at this point, you really should be interacting with your NIH program official rather than your scientific review officer. And that person can advise you on a number of things, whether to submit just-in-time information, how to resolve human subject, vertebrate animal inclusion problems, and to consider the options at your disposal. You might be advised, you might consider submitting a new application. You might revise and resubmit the application that just completed peer review, or you could appeal the review outcome. That's a fairly complicated process that your program officer could describe to you. Next, please. All right, so that's the first level. Now, let's talk about the second level of peer review, which is the NIH Advisory Councils. These are typically composed of a broad and diverse membership. They typically have public members or disease advocates on them. Awards cannot be made without the council's approval. The procedures vary across the IC, so I'm not going to go into those procedures at any great length. Now, each council is chaired by the director of the institute or center and is advised by their staff. Next, please. So what do these council members advise the director about? Well, they talk about priority areas for research, policy issues, concept clearance, funding priorities. But for your purposes, they recommend applications for funding. They also consider appeals of initial peer review that cannot be resolved any other way. Next, please. As we talked about, the IC director makes the final funding decisions. Those are based on a number of factors. The outcome of initial peer review is certainly an important consideration, but not the only one. For example, we have special initiatives where Congress mandates that we study certain diseases or certain problems, and that is factored in the recommendation of the council. And of course, if we have money, that's always important if we have money to spend. Next, please. Oh boy, so what is review integrity? Each of us has a responsibility to uphold peer review integrity, and a violation can lead to many serious consequences. I'm going to ask that you log in on Thursday and listen to a discussion with Michael Lauer on review integrity and mistakes you don't want to make. So let's go to the next slide, please. There are two topics here I want to talk about, which are conflict of interest and confidentiality. So please be advised that each reviewer must sign 2 conflict of interest certifications, and failure to declare them can result in penalties. So here you see the certification language that they attest to. And next. Confidentiality has become front and center lately because we've had some breaches of confidentiality that turned out to be very, very serious. I'm going to assume that by and large the audience today is applicants, and I must emphasize to you that contacting a reviewer to ask about the review of your application, to provide more data, to bribe them, to threaten them, is just strictly forbidden, and it will get you in a world of trouble. So don't even think about it. Now let's say you're at a meeting and you're walking down the aisle of a conference and we're all about to crowd again, and you run into a reviewer. It's certainly fine to say, yes, hi, but do not discuss your application. Okay, next. So what are your action items? So you have responsibilities here. I urge you to join the NIH Guide table of contents. This is where you will see new funding opportunity announcements. You will see new policy notices. Read Section 5 of your funding opportunity announcement. Uphold review integrity, and stay tuned for the mock study section. So with that, I'm going to open this up to a panel discussion.
All right, so as we're getting our...
Let me just pause to make a few comments. So you had the presenter saying that you are not supposed to contact any of the reviewers. The question might be, how do you even know who is reviewing? Okay, so that's what I want to explain. When you submit this application, about maybe 2 weeks or a month before your applications are discussed or reviewed, if you go to your ER Common, you will see the roster. So there will be a roster that would have been posted to all applicants. So you see who and who will be discussing, will be attending the study session. That's how you can, know and the day that the meeting will be taking place. So that's how you are not supposed to get in touch or contact or influence one way or the other. And the reviewers are not supposed to even discuss anything, that, oh, I'm reviewing this. No. That's the rule. The other thing that I want to emphasize for those which I expect everybody here will be interested in knowing about the weekly announcement, and that's where you get to know which application you may want to submit. I will send a link, maybe I'll submit it, give it to our coordinator so that can be distributed on how you can join the TOC. It's weekly and it doesn't cost you anything. It's going to, it doesn't come more than once a week. And you look at it, if there's anything that is in your field, you read more about it. If there is not, you can delete it. But it's always good to just be abreast of the information. That's how you get to know what is going on. So let's just proceed with some
panel on the screen. Thank you so much, Sally. That was a great presentation. As you can imagine, we have all kinds of questions here for you and the others. Can you talk a bit about how peer reviewers are trained? Or any of the other panel members for that matter. And please remember to take yourselves off of mute.
You can take that one, Maggie. Each SRO might have their own approach for training, but I think in general, all of us take it very seriously. And I know for myself, I'll do a training teleconference or video conference now with the reviewers and actually schedule a couple of different sessions so we make sure we get as many reviewers as we possibly can. We have training materials, many training materials available online through NIH OER. We have reviewer sources. We also, I will also send emails to the reviewers with some training guidance periodically throughout the process. So we never let our reviewers go into a study section unprepared.
Yeah. Sorry, the SRO is a study reviewer, a review officer. That is the officer that is in charge of the review, and he or she is independent of the program officer. So it's like we have two arms. One is in charge of reviewing, and they don't make any decision about funding, but they just send the reports and the outcome to the program officer. Program officer is the one that develop the announcement and who is going to monitor and administer the funding of the program. And this other SRO, which is the study review officer, his role is just to coordinate the study session, have everybody review the merit and the lack of it of those applications, and that's all that session will do. So you can see that there is usually no influence, because for you to say you know somebody, it has to be the influence here, but that oftentimes doesn't happen. But it doesn't mean that sometimes things may not be preached, but just so you are aware. You have a quick question.
My question is, can the program officer step down after the review process and they submitted the review and accepted the recommended proposal? When it reaches the program officer, can he step down?
What do you mean, resign?
No, step like not approve the submission from the scientific.
Oh, the review officer does not recommend. Just report what the reviewers are people like you and I. We don't work for NIH, but by virtue of our expertise, we are assembled and review that's why it is peer review. That is, we are peers here, as long as we are not collaborating and we are not related and we are not in the same institution, I can review your application. That's no conflict. So that's why it's peer. So the review officer will just submit the report, and the program officer, what the program officer does with that, the review officer has no influence on that. So he is left to follow the rules that have been set aside.
So another question: what if the reviewers were really impressed with the submission?
Yeah, that will be based. They will reflect that on the score. So such application could have between 10 and 30 or 40, whichever way. But then that does not guarantee that it's going to be funded. There's still process, and priorities and all the rest. But oftentimes, you want your application to be reviewed. To be discussed. You heard that there are some that will not be discussed. So during the review session, the study session, we'll start and say, okay, today at this meeting for this session, because some session will last for 3 days. So we have 100 applications to discuss, but we're just going to discuss the top 50. Based on the initial score from the reviewers, we have how many per application? At least 3. So based on that, you see some that will be better. So it's like, if you have one really low, there's no need wasting time. So attention will be paid to the top half. But a reviewer can say, among those that will not be discussed, I want this and this or only this to be discussed. Oftentimes you are not asked to explain why. But maybe you went through the application and you think that, okay, that means you were not the application was not assigned to you. I think sometimes if it's assigned to you, you will also say that, but that means you've already given it a better score. Because if in your review process, you gave it a poor score, let's say, it's around 8, and now during the study session, you want it discussed. No, that doesn't make sense, because, from your evaluation, you've already indicated that this is not a meritorious application.
Sir, I just want to know, we were told that before you can even apply for NIH grant, you need the ERA common number.
That's correct, you need.
What does it take to actually get one? Is it like OPID number that we can apply for?
Okay, that's a good question. Every question is good. I don't like to say that, but I don't say it, but every question is good. So, the ERA common account will have to be created or applied for through your institution. So it's not something that you can just say independently. You have to be. It has to go through your institution. So that's how that works. Any other question? Okay, let's continue. Okay.
How do we know if our institution is already registered?
Yeah, you go to your grant office. If you don't have grant office,
so we do conduct review orientation sessions, and if it's in response to an RFA or a PAR, and the review is happening within a review or within an institute outside of CSR, then we will even have program staff in those sessions for the most part, and reviewers will frequently ask questions about, getting some clarity about FOA. And we try our best that if there is a little bit of ambiguity in the FOA itself, that the benefit of doubt goes towards the applicant. And they don't bring an applicant because the FOA itself was not very clear.
Great, thank you so much. What about how do program officials work with SROs, and might one program official work with many SROs?
Yeah, so this is John, I can take this. So at NIDDK, SROs and program officials will work together on initial drafts of the funding opportunity announcements to, for clarity, especially clarity in the review criteria. Program staff may provide some suggestions into potential reviewers based on their understanding of individual scientific expertise. SROs may or may not consider those. They may consider them a starting point or identify additional reviewers for the roster on the committee that's evaluating those applications.
Great, thank you so much, John. What about resubmissions? We have a number of questions about resubmissions. Do they automatically go to the same study sections? What do you do if you don't want it to? Why do some of the same study sections, your resubmission does either far better or far worse than the original application, even when you address the reviewer comments?
So what she's saying is, after the decision is made, and take for example an application that was not discussed. So you have the choice of resubmitting. And then when you submit, you are allowed to indicate what study session, what program you want it to go to. You have an NIDDK, you have also, if you know it, but if you don't know, they will assign it. So what she's saying is that sometimes it goes to different studies, different programs on resubmission, and some believe that, okay, if it had gone to this other one, maybe it would have performed better. But you have that option of resubmitting, and if it's discussed, you know that, okay, maybe this time around your score is this. If because of the evaluation and the comments, the summary statement will contain what the reviewers feel about each session. So I have put some sample applications. You already have about 2. I put more in a folder that will be given to you, and the summary statement, which is the report of after the discussion. These are just sample from NIH that you can go through later on. Yes.
How would you know if your application is not considered before you will be actually submitted?
Oh, you will know because it will be sent to you. You in fact, from the presentation, about 3 days after the meeting, you will see the score, and then maybe 4 to 5 days or about a week, you will see the summary statement. If it's discussed. If it's not discussed, there won't be a score, overall impact score. But if it's discussed, there will be overall impact score that will be assigned to tell you, to give you an indication that, okay, are you in the sphere or area of possibly being funded? But if it's not discussed, what that means is that, sorry, you have to resubmit. Because if it's not discussed, there's no way they can assign impact score. If there's no impact score, it cannot even be considered for funding at all.
The second is that I overheard the presenter saying it's an appeal.
Okay, yeah, you can appeal depending on what the reason. Let's say you feel that you saw somebody or maybe some people on the roster that attended the review, your study session, and you think that you have conflict with them. There are people that maybe you have some disagreement with them, and then from what you could read, you think that maybe one of them may have reviewed and then decided to give you a paper, So, but you have to be sure, because there's no way you won't know what happened during the study session, except if you also have somebody there that is giving you feedback and say, oh, look, it was that guy, and that's not supposed to be, because if you appeal and you have to provide the evidence and you point to that guy, he is also in trouble. So that's why it's, seed map. I can't tell you I review this or I don't review this. The process, no. What we can show you are the things that NIH itself has provided. So that way I can't run into trouble. Because otherwise there's no way I can discuss my experience at the study session without letting out some things that I'm not supposed to let out, and I've signed confidentiality notes. So that's why NIH itself provides all these, for training, and then I don't speak more than that. So that's okay.
Megan, I can answer part of that, or at least start with your last one there, which I think I saw pop up a couple of times about why does it sometimes get worse. Each application, when it comes in, is reviewed on its own merit. And while response to the prior review is one of the considerations we ask reviewers to look at it, it's certainly only one thing that influences the review and the application score. And your application might be assigned to a whole new set of reviewers who see a different set of concerns with the application, and their scoring is going to be different.
And that's even if it goes to the same panel, Kathy?
Even if it goes to the same panel, it can have a different set of reviewers. Our reviewers are volunteers, so a reviewer available at one meeting might not be available for a second, but we also don't make a commitment that we assign the same reviewers to the application.
Thank you. What about intellectual property and unpublished data that are in applications? How do we protect that information?
I'll take that one. Each reviewer must sign a legal document before they ever see the application. It's called a confidentiality certification. And that was part of the language on that slide that we looked at right at the end of the presentation. But they vow under penalty of perjury that they will not divulge information that is confidential in the meeting or in the application. Now, we have had some reaches, and we have pursued those people with the full extent of our legal capabilities.
So one can go.
Thank you. Just back to the resubmission question, will the summary statement of the initial submission be sent to the new reviewers along with the resubmission materials?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
On the application.
No, the prior summary statement is available to the reviewers.
But not the prior application.
Correct.
So can a study session member who's in conflict because they're from the same institution, can they access the application that they're in conflict with?
No. No, the system bars them from seeing materials.
They used to be able to, but we put an end to that.
Great. So another question on a different topic. We have a fair number of people interested in letters of support and how letters of support are used and who they're actually needed from. Is it all key personnel? Is it others? What's your advice?
No, I can answer that. So generally, if you have people from your own institution, let's say you have a postdoc, you don't need a letter of support from the postdoc. You have a faculty member from your same department, and he or she is going to get a salary support in there plus lab support. You don't need a letter of support. But if you have essentially a server bot in there, for example, if you're at Hopkins and you're collaborating with University of Maryland, then it's good to have a letter of support. And the letter of support should clearly indicate what's going to be the role of the support writer. Are they going to provide you intellectual input? Are they just going to provide you with readings? Are they going to help you with data interpretation and what all? And that will really help us as well as the review panel in making a determination about the utility of that letter.
Great, thank you, Darren.
Some FOAs, some funding opportunity announcements specify that certain letters of support are required And if they are missing, the application will not be accepted. So read the FOA carefully.
And that's good advice across the board. Thank you, Sally. Going back to Sally, you had mentioned breaches of confidentiality. Folks want to know what, if anything, changed in response to them.
Oh, well, we're going to talk a lot more about that on Thursday and the mistakes you don't want to make. And I hope that you've found the presentation last year that Dr. Lauer and I did, where he gave a lot of these stories on the, what did we call that, the master class. So there have been consequences. Some people have been fired by their employers once this became known. We have removed a number of people from the peer review process so they can no longer interfere or breach confidentiality. We have referred a couple individuals for suspension and debarment. So there's a range of consequences that could ensue.
Great, thank you, Sally. How does NIH address or prevent reviewer bias towards applications related to institutions? Excuse me, either they're minority serving or maybe Ivy League or PIs. How are we addressing bias? An easy question, of course.
You stumped the panel. So we did an analysis some years ago on the impact of each criterion on the overall impact score. And out of them all, the one with the least influence on the overall outcome was the institution. So I'm not sure that we have assessed bias in that way, but I know that it turns out to be the one with the least influence.
Nice. Thank you, Sally. How about switching to a little bit about, percentiles? So, is a percentile for funding by study section or across institutes? What does it mean, a 10%? It means 10% of the applications in the study section are funded. Like, what does it mean?
So individual ICs will publish their headlines. So some ICs will fund up to the 60th percentile for RO1s from established investigators. They may fund up to 25% for early stage and new investigators. And for the first resubmission of an RO1, there could be an intermediary percentile pay line, like 19th percentile. Those are the numbers currently on the NIDDK website.
So thank you, John. The percentile itself it's normalizing across study sections, right?
Yes. Correct. Some percentiles for the individual study section will have a percentile based on prior 2 rounds of applications that came into that particular study section. Others may be percentile against across the entire NIH percentile base. And in a lot of RFAs issued by ICs, there are no pay lines. Fellowships may not be percentile. K applications may not be percentile. It depends on the IC.
Thank you. Why would a funding decision get pushed to the next fiscal year, right? If somebody did really well,
Sorry, this won't benefit you much, so I'll just explain one thing or the other, and then we'll go to the mock session. So, but the percentage that the woman was trying to push here is to give an idea of whether the application will be funded or not, and it's usually a comparison between the study session, the outcome of the study session, and about 2 previous ones. So some centers or IC, that is Institute of Centers, would have published their percentile, which we refer to as the pay line, that anything above this will not be funded. So some is 10, some is 15. Sometimes if the budget, because the NI depends on national budget, if it's really straight, you have some competitive IC that are just maybe 5 or 7. So for example, if your summary statement comes and it says your percentile is 7, and you know that the published pay line, which is the cutoff, is 12. So it's about time to now be celebrating, but that except something terrible happens, that's when you won't be funded, because you already, within the pay line. But sometimes, what if you are the borderline? So instead of maybe the pay line is 15 and you are just maybe 16. So what you do is you call the program officer, you kind of schedule appointment and discuss and tell you, because sometimes they can actually pick depending on the priority, because you may have scored that, missed that pay line, but if they are so much interested in what you propose, so they may make a case at the council meeting, and then if everybody agrees, that may be funded. Or if you are a new investigator, new or young investigator, the pay line is also different. So while others may be 15, they may make it like 20. But there's a definition for that. That's maybe about, you are less than about 10 years after your terminal degree. So, but after that, you lose that status. Any question before we go to mock session, where we may have some opportunity to ask more questions, because I want us to get to the mock session. So like I said, I've included other materials, resources that you may want to go through at your own leisure time. Yes.
So I'm just wondering what it means that the proposal is ambitious.
Oh yes. Will somebody from Group A wants to answer that question? Okay. So when you say something is ambitious, that's when you propose to do something that's too much. That's it. That the reviewers consider that it's just too much for either the resources that will be provided and the time that you are proposing. So if you say you want to go to the Mars between now and end of 2023 from Nigeria, we will consider that as too ambitious, because I don't think the eagle is flying in the first place. In the infrastructure, and before you put everything. So when you propose, I will do this, we'll do this, and then the aims, you look at the aims and look at this as if all the things that you are proposing are just too much. So that also can make your application not to be funded. Because you look at it, you're asking to be given money to do something that will succeed. The outcome may not be positive, because when you go, you want to find the association between this and that. It's not all the time that it need to be positive, but you being able to accomplish it as proposed, given the resources that you have access to, given the time. So if it's known that, okay, this is just too ambitious, that will affect your application. So that's what it means by saying, over ambitious or too ambitious. Any other question? Okay, so let's then go to the mock session. Yeah, please.
I think you should welcome
Yeah, we just click this. If you click here, it should pick it.
All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead.
It's number.
With that, I want to thank you for joining the session. My name is Megan Columbus. I am.
2 times.
All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the
Okay.
Hello, and welcome to the peer review portion of the NIH virtual seminar, the 2020 version. I'm Sally Amaro, the NIH Review Policy Officer.
All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the NIH Peer Review Live Mock Study section. This is a great follow-on session to the last one we just had, which gave the basics of our peer review process. This one's going to be live. It's going to be interactive with a lot of people on the screen to give you a great sense of what's going on. Your MC for today is Brian Bushaw. He is the Chief of Review of the National Eye Institute. And I am Megan Columbus. I am Director of Communications and Outreach for the Office of Extramural Research. And I'll just be coming back in at the end to help with some Q&A. With that, take it away, Brian.
Hi everyone, welcome to the live mock study section. For most of you, the review meeting is really a black box. You submit your grant, you wait some time, you get a score, summary statement. We don't really know what happens in between. This presentation will give you a peek inside, so you'll get an idea of what happens during the review, during discussion, what topics might come up. This is a mock presentation, the application is real. And also, keep in mind, everything is abbreviated. Most of your meetings are half a day, whole day. We used to have some kind of day and a half in-person meetings. So it's sort of an abbreviated version of what you might see. This is interactive. At 2 points during the presentation, we'll pause. A question will be addressed to the audience, and then we'll do a quick poll just to see what the answers are, what people are thinking. If you're able to guess the right answer as part of the review, it's going to follow up to the peer review talk. Okay,
so like we said earlier, this is how a study session looks like. But you will notice there will be about 2 or 3 questions that will be raised, which usually about things that usually don't happen in the real study session. But that's just to answer questions that you may have, so just pay attention.
3 applications today. In between, I'll give you a short summary, touch on some main points. During the talk, as Megan said, you can enter questions in Q&A. We have some review sheets and senior SROs behind the scenes who will be answering them. And then we have time at the end. If there are certain questions that are coming up during the meeting, we'll try to address those if we have some time. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to turn the meeting over, and we'll have the presentation start. Okay, take it away.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jessica McElveen, and I am the Scientific Review Officer and designated federal official for this meeting. Most of my work is done before the meeting happens, arranging the logistics, recruiting, and preparing reviewers. At the meeting, I make sure that NIH regulations and procedures are followed and take notes for the final summary statement. So we can go ahead and get started with introductions. Please give your name, university, and a brief description of your area of expertise. We will start with our chair, Dr. Peter Kozel. And Dr. Kozel, I believe you're muted.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Kozel. I'm from the University of Europa, and I will be the chair for this meeting. My job is to guide the discussion and ensure that it stays on topic. I will introduce each application and assign reviewers, and will direct the committee when it is time to discuss specific topics, such as the budget, or to give fund scores. And if we can have the rest of our reviewers, please.
Hey everyone, I'm Lana Sheckham. I'm a professor at the University of Florida, and my area of expertise is in pharmacology.
Hello, I'm Debbie Hodge. I am a professor at the University of Maryland, and my background's in biochemistry.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chardell Spriggs. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland School of Medicine with a background in behavioral neuroscience.
Hi, I'm Shadi Rajapaksa. I'm a professor of chemistry at Duke University.
Hi, I'm Fei. I'm calling from UCSF, and my expertise is in alternative medicine.
My name is Wally. I'm associate professor at the Wayne State University Amongst Cancer Center, and I manage the thoracic oncology program.
Brian?
Yeah, Danielle, you were talking, I think, is your microphone on? You were trying to talk, but you weren't. Okay, maybe we'll come back to her.
Okay, so I am Philippe Marmillo. I am professor at the George Washington University, and my expertise in biostatistics and clinical trials.
Hi, my name is Gracia. I'm a professor at Imperial College, and I work in the Department of Neuroscience, and my expertise is in biology of ethics.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. We also have another NIH employee that's observing the meeting. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Gaylord, and I'm a program officer in the National Institute of Drug Abuse, NIDA, or NIDA. I wrote the request for applications, also called an RFA, that you will be reviewing. Before the discussion starts, the SRO has agreed to allow me to give you a description of the RFA and to answer any general questions. My main role at this meeting is to observe and to take notes on the discussion. And I will be available for the duration of the meeting to address any questions that you might have about the RFA if the SRO finds appropriate.
Thank you. Before I turn the meeting over to the chair, I'd like to first go over some legal issues. In terms of confidentiality, the discussion of the applications is confidential. Anything we discuss here should not leave the room. In terms of conflicts of interest, thank you for identifying your conflicts prior to the meeting. If you're in conflict with an application, you will leave the virtual room during the discussion of that application. In terms of scientific misconduct, if you suspect any type of misconduct in the application, please contact me privately prior to the discussion. We want to give the principal investigators the benefit of a doubt before this topic comes up during a discussion, since the application may have to be deferred if there really is an issue. Here's a summary of the review format for the meeting. The chair will introduce the applications and the reviewers. Then the assigned reviewers will give the preliminary scores before reviewer 1 gives a brief overview of the application. Each reviewer will state the main score driving issues for the application. You don't have to repeat what was already said by a previous reviewer. Next, the discussion is open to the whole panel. You can participate in the discussion of any application for which you are not in conflict. After the discussion, the reviewers will state if there are any issues with production of human subjects, the inclusion of women, minorities, and across the lifespan, or the use of vertebrate animals, all where applicable. Then the assigned reviewers will give their final scores. And after final scoring, we'll discuss any issues with the budget, resource sharing plan, and or the authentication of key biological and chemical resources. Are there any questions before we begin the review?
Yes, I have a question. I apologize. I'm reviewer 7 and my sound now is finally working. So
This is one of the things that don't normally happen.
Question about scoring. What is the cutoff for funding? That is, can you tell me what score I should give the application if I want it to be funded?
Okay, we're gonna stop now. This is our first interactive question. So if we could put the first poll question up. That is, should the SRO let the reviewers know what score to give if they want the application to be funded? So it's a yes or no question, and we'll give maybe 20 seconds or so. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, so 88% said no, they should not. We'll go back to the SRO for this.
All right, good job. In review meetings, we do not discuss the F word or funding. We are here to assess and score the scientific and technical merit of the applications, and we do not make funding decisions. At the second level of review, the advisory council considers recommendations and scores in light of institute goals and priorities. The two stages of review are a cornerstone of the NIH peer review system. Next, I would like to ask the program officer to briefly discuss the purpose and goals of the RFA.
Sure. So you will be reviewing applications from an RFA that NIDA named Discovery of Novel Treatments for Opioid Use Disorders. The RFA is meant to support research on novel therapies that have not been approved for clinical use. The applications can focus on pharmacological, behavioral, or alternative treatments. At NIDA, we decided to allow for a broad range of applications, so this RFA is clinical trial optional. What that means is that we can accept applications that either involve or do not involve a clinical trial.
Thank you very much for that helpful summary. I'd like to remind everyone that there are separate review criteria listed in the RFA for clinical trials, and so for these applications, please be sure to address the correct review criteria during the discussion. I will now turn the meeting over to our chair, Dr. Kozel.
Before we start our discussion, I'd like to remind everyone to limit their evaluation to the review criteria published in the RFA. And also, please focus your discussion on the issues in the applications which drove your score. So let's begin with our first application. Dr. Marmelo is in conflict. If we could put him in the waiting room briefly. Okay, I'm going to assume Dr. Marmelo has left. Our first application is from Dr. Jane Johnson. She's an early stage investigator, and the title of her application is IGF-1 as a potential treatment for opioid use disorders. The assigned reviewers are Drs. Checkham, Hodge, and Spriggs. Would the assigned reviewers please give their preliminary scores?
My score is 2. I gave it 3.
I have a 5, but for reading the preliminary critiques, I will most likely adjust my score based on the comments from the other reviewers.
Thank you. Dr. Checkham, can you lead us?
Quickly, that's one thing that I forgot to mention. When scores are submitted, there's a window of time that you are allowed to read what others on the review panel have scored the application that you have as yours. So you can see other people's score, and you are allowed to change your score at the study session and after the meeting. So that's why it's kind of referred to as preliminary. So you may change it up or down. So that's what is happening here.
Sure. So, as you said, this is an application from an early stage investigator. The application proposes to leverage some recent and very exciting discoveries with insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1, to see if it can be used as a treatment for opioid use disorder. The first 2 aims involve biochemistry and pharmacology-based experiments to develop IGF-1 as a therapeutic. And the third aim will examine the effects of IGF-1 in preclinical studies. I'm very excited about the potential impact of this study. The application clearly addresses the rigor of the prior research by pointing out the strengths and weaknesses of the published research that support the project. In addition, the use of male and female rodents in the animal models of AIM-3 is a strength. The approach section is detailed and all of the necessary information needed to assess the experiments is clearly presented. Therefore, the scientific rigor is strong as well. The application is innovative and the environment is stellar. I had some concerns with the design of one of the aims, but these concerns are minor. I also gave the PI the benefit of doubt as far as the strength of her publication record since she's an early stage investigator. That's it.
So the second reviewer will come.
Okay, I will jump in and first say that I agree with all of the first reviewer's comments. So I'm not going to repeat all the strengths, but I just want to add that I'm impressed with all the expertise, such as the biochemistry, the pharmacology, that is really required for the aims. So it's represented on this research team. I just think they're wonderful. This increases my confidence that the PI will be able to accomplish the aims. That's all I have.
So my focus was on the preclinical behavioral test in AIM-3. This aspect of the application has some flaws in the design. I personally do not agree with the control the PI chose. For the one aim, this is an issue, but hearing the comments from the other reviewers on the potential impact of the research, I will adjust my final score so it reflects the whole application.
Thank you all. Let's now open up the discussion up to the full committee.
So I have a question about the pharmacology expertise. This application have a big growth factor because it can be tricky to work with.
Oh, this is Sean again. I'm the program officer. Can I address this issue since I've been advising the PI on this particular application?
Okay, I will stop the presentation here for our second interactive poll question. The question is, during discussion, the program officer jump in the conversation and answer the question. Okay, I think that's enough time. We'll see what the poll answer is. Okay, 70%, a little closer, but 70% say no. 30% say yes. I will turn it back over to the SO.
Thank you for asking, but no, this would not be appropriate. Program staff are here to observe the discussion and they can answer general questions about the RFA if the SRO finds it appropriate, but they should not be involved in the discussion of specific applications. It is important that we keep the two levels of peer review separate.
I think I can step in and answer that question about the expertise. There is a co-investigator with extensive expertise with insulin-like growth factor, so that area is covered.
Thank you. So this application does involve the use of vertebrate animals. We heard a little bit about that before. This is a scoreable issue. Could the assignment giver tell us a little bit more about the use of animals?
Yes, the PI adequately addresses the questions related to the use of vertebrate animals.
I agree. I also agree.
Okay, good, thank you. I'm going to summarize the discussion. This application is from an early stage investigator. The goal of the project is to explore the potential for IGF-1 to be used as a therapy for opioid use disorder. The application addresses a clear need in the field, and reviewers agree that the potential impact is high. Both the rigor of the prior research and scientific rigor have been well addressed. There were some concerns about the controls selected for the behavioral studies in AIM-3, but this was considered to be a minor point. I think that we're ready for our final scores from the three reviewers.
My final score is still a 2. My score is also a 2.
I'll move to a 3.
Thank you. Our range is from 2 to 3. I'm going to ask all reviewers to enter their final overall impact scores. Remember to hit save. Are there any budgetary comments?
And I think the budget is appropriate for the proposed work.
I agree.
I also agree.
Excellent. How is the resource sharing plan?
The resource sharing is very detailed and all of the appropriate areas have been addressed.
Agree?
I agree as well.
Fantastic. And finally, how about the authentication of key biological chemical resources?
Authentication plans for the growth factor are appropriate.
I agree.
I do agree.
Excellent. Thank you all. Let's bring Dr. Momolo back in for the next application.
Okay, I'm going to jump in again and give a little recap. So there are a number of questions about ESI applications. So ESI applications qualify for that. It just counts for, it's just for all one application. So it's not just a stage of your career for any application, just R1s. And they are reviewed, most R1s are reviewed in CSR study sections. And the ESI applications are clustered together. So that way, the ESIs are giving a little consideration on preliminary data and publications. And it really helps reviewers get in the mindset of we're reviewing ESI applications. And generally, they do discuss at least half of that cluster. So for this application, also you notice most of the applications you see are multidisciplinary. So it's possible that one reviewer will be there just for an aim or two. And this is why the discussion is so important. They review the applications, give their preliminary scores, but then when they look at the critiques and have the discussion, they can see all the different aims and all the expertise, and then the score comes together. We also note that certain aspects of the grant will affect the score. Other parts like budget or authentication, they're discussed after the scoring, so it won't affect the overall score of the application. And then finally, program officers are there, take notes, to observe the application, the reviews, and help out the PI. I'll say they really do their best to attend the meeting and observe and listen to the discussion, but they generally don't participate in the discussion. It's possible at the beginning, if it's an RFA, the SRO might ask the program officer to give some background on the FOA or the RFA, but the point there is they're making general comments and not comments about a specific application. Okay, with that, we will move on to the next application.
Thank you. Our second application this afternoon is from Dr. Tom Wilson. It's entitled Novel Alternative Treatments for Opioid Use. There are no conflicts. The assigned reviewers are Drs. Rajapaksa, Chen, and Wali. And could the assigned reviewers please give their preliminary scores?
2.
1.
Thank you. Now, these scores are very close and indicate that there are many strengths with this application. And I'm going to ask the reviewers to focus on what factors led to such favorable scores. Dr. Rajapaksa, if we could start with your review.
Yes, thank you. So this application proposes to test alternative treatments, especially plant extracts as a novel form of treatment for opioid use disorders. The PI is a renowned medicinal chemist who has experience developing plant-based medications. The rigor of the prior research is addressed based on the review of the literature in this field. The weakness is that he does not have access to the plant extracts that they propose to use, and it does not appear that they have any time, they have access any time to. Overall, even though there were a number of weaknesses with the approach and the level of innovation, marginal at best, the PI has a good working knowledge in this field, and I'm sure that they can figure out how to solve potential design flaws or overcoming technical challenges that the study gets underway. Overall, I really like the application, and I'm very confident that the PI is able to get the work done. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm the second reviewer for this application. I agree that the PI is very talented, but as I was reading the application, I realized that he hasn't published in the last few years, maybe a decade or so.
In addition, I'm not sure from the application that they have the resources and the personnel to conduct the experiments. Well, and I also have another concern about the novelty of the plant-based medications. I think that's low because they are similar to the ones that are already being tested in clinical studies. So based on that, I thought the innovation suffers a bit. But overall, I do agree with the first reviewer. This is a good application. I'm going to stop here.
Well, thank you. I'm the territory reviewer, and I agree with my both colleagues, primary and secondary reviewer. PI has been very well known, a person in this field, and while I was in graduate school, he used to publish in high impact scientific journal, but lately I have come across that he hasn't been publishing in high impact scientific journals. And besides that, I have additional concern that they are proposing to utilize animal models in this application, and will be only using male mice. So I do not agree with the rationale for excluding female mice in the design. So I have a question for SRO. Should this affect my score?
Yes. According to the guidelines for rigor and reproducibility, sex as a biological variable should be addressed in the approach section of the application. If the PIs will not be using both sexes, they need to provide a justification, and this issue can affect your score.
Well, in that case, I consider this as an additional weakness with this application.
Okay, I think that concludes the comments from our three assigned viewers, and we're now going to open up our discussion to the full panel.
Okay, I'm.
Is the first reviewer the oldest or the most experienced?
No. It's not based on that. It could be anybody. Yeah. But the share of the study session is usually about the oldest, not in age, but membership of the study session. So because it randomly, it depends on the SRO. We'll assign maybe 7 applications to you, and on each of those, 2 of them may be, you will be number 1, others you may be 2 or 3. Because number 1, you really have to do a lot of work.
Yeah, I want to leave.
Yeah.
I've been looking for a convenient time.
Okay.
But let me just take a bit of your time. When I gave my lecture, I hope you remember these 2 cases.
Yeah.
So I was showing them my diaries. I said, sometimes we don't agree that it's my diary, but he is. We were linked together by Prof. And he was the one that I said went to South Africa for all mentoring to go and mentor some people. And left his land for us. That land we're running with Dr. Tayo and Richard Opa, who is his own boss. So you are lucky to have those 2 mentors.
An assigned reviewer, and I didn't really read the application. Can I make a comment about the discussion?
Okay, we're going to have our third poll question here. One of the reviewers asks, if they have not read the application, they're not assigned, are they able to participate in the discussion? And yes or no. Now, I'll say as an aside, some of our sound issues weren't scripted, but they really aren't part of any review meeting these days. It makes it more realistic. Okay, this is split. This is a good question. Can they participate? 55 said yes, and 45% no. I'll turn it over to the SRO for the answer.
Yes. Anyone who is not in conflict with an application can participate in the discussion. Since everyone will be submitting final votes, everyone can participate in the discussion.
Great. So what I'd like to say is that I'm hearing a number of weaknesses. Lack of access to the compounds, little current work by the PI, and failure to address sex as a biological variable. That seemed inconsistent with the scores and the high impact range that the assigned reviewers gave. Perhaps the assigned reviewers could speak a little bit more about how they came up with the initial scores.
Your assessment and scores should be based on what is presented in the application, not what the PI did years ago. In addition, the qualifications of the applicant are only one of the 5 review criteria. If there are weaknesses in the approach, we should not assume that they will be fixed based on the comments in the summary statement.
Could someone address Dr. Shekin's question?
Yes, you make a valid point. The application does have issues in the research plan, and the PI has not done a good job in discussing potential pitfalls or giving any alternative approaches. And after hearing additional weaknesses from the other reviewers and realizing that my score might not reflect the number of weaknesses, I will adjust my score.
Yeah, I also agree with the first reviewers, and I will also adjust my score.
Sorry, my apologies. Since this is my first review meeting, I'm still calibrating my scores. So I see a number of weaknesses, so I will adjust my score as well.
Okay, thank you. That was a great question. Are there any concerns about the use of vertebrate animals aside from the issue with the justification for the use of only male mice, which we previously talked about?
So this aspect is acceptable. All points have been addressed adequately.
I agree with that too.
I agree wholeheartedly, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll summarize our discussion. The goal of this application is to develop new plant-based therapies for the treatment of opioid use disorders. Reviewers acknowledge that the PI has an in-depth knowledge of the topic, although he has not published in almost a decade. There are also concerns about the availability of resources and personnel to conduct the experiments, novelty of the approach, use of only male mice without an adequate justification for excluding female mice, as well as a lack of discussion on the potential pitfalls and alternative approaches. We've heard that our assigned reviewers are going to change their scores. Could we have those final scores, please?
Yes, based on the discussion, I will raise my score to 4.
I will also change my score to 4 too.
I will also move to 4.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have...
So you see, you can appreciate what happens. So this is an example of what happens. Sometimes it's the other way around. That you see the preliminary score will be high, and after discussion and somebody who raises one question and then clarify things in the process, and everybody's always like the light bulb was switched on and then it start to come down the better score. Sometimes it's all like what has happened here now. So that's the way it is. That's part of the usefulness of peer review. Because nobody is an island of knowledge, But as you listen, you calibrate and revise or review your score. Any question? Okay. Oh no, everybody. So whether the application was assigned to you or not, you can comment on all applications that you don't have conflict on. If you have conflict, you won't even be there. You'll be removed from there. So, but you, as member of the study session committee, you are allowed to comment on even the applications that were not assigned to you. Yeah, that's the SRO. Yeah, the program officer is. I can see.
concern. So that was why when she interjected and said she wanted to explain something because of previous discussion with the applicant, that is a no. Yes, it's an office because the report will go to the program officer and she will compile the result and then take it to the council meeting. So funding decision and all the rest are made at the council level and it's influenced by the program, the director of the program. But the program office and the SRO is not involved in that. The SRO's business finishes after the review session.
And the final score is not announced. I mean, after.
Oh no! It's not. Everybody votes. You don't see other people's votes. So everything is virtual. You just enter your score. Before now, it used to be by paper, but everything's online now. No, everybody. Yeah, everybody. But those who are assigned to the application define the range. So, like this one, there's a kind of tight. Everybody is 4. So, for one thing they've not been doing is that they've not been announcing that if you want to vote outside the range, you should indicate. In the re-session, that is the case. If the range is 1 to 3, and you feel that no, maybe I want to vote 7. So you won't mention your score, but just say you raise your hand that I'm voting outside the range. So the SRO will note that. You don't often have to explain, or you could just say based on what people have discussed and maybe you're concerned, you just want to vote outside the range, but you don't. The only people that disclose their score are the reviewers assigned to that particular application.
What I think that resonates with me here is the fact that the research team is very important. And
Oh.
the roles they perform in that subject.
That's very correct. That's good observation. Because if what you are proposing lacks important expertise, let's say you want, like I said, you want to fly to the Mars, and you discover that there are no pilots or no engineer, definitely that's not going to be a successful project because nobody is going to fund you to waste the resources. Any other question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Although I don't have this detail, but I want to ask this issue of letter of intent for full proposal.
Letter of intent
for full proposal. Because some might first ask for letter of intent before asking for full proposal.
Okay.
And when so screening at the level of letter of intent before calling for
Sure.
proposal. So what I'm seeing here, it's not like the nation of letter of intent. However, what I'm trying to say is that in some, the letter of intent also, because it was saying the person have not published, like in the last one, you not published in the last few years, maybe having some capacity and the rest. Does it mean that if you are reviewing someone, you really have to go back and look into this record?
Oh, sure.
Not what he actually submitted. Or you have to go beyond what he submitted.
No, so first of all, let me address the letter of intent. That is at the level of the program officer. When the RFA comes out, it will be indicated in the detail. That's why I will try and provide you a sample before I leave today. Of RFA. It's always very detailed, and even if you are not applying, and the RFA is related to your expertise, your field, it's good to always go through because you see what they are requesting for and others, and then it will be indicated whether letter of intent is required. The letter of intent actually serves multiple purposes, one of which is, the program officer wants to know that will there be enough applications? Because if many people are not applying, they are not going to, proceed with that. So maybe at the end of the day, you only have 5. When you think, there should be like 50, that means it's not a topic that people are willing to sue. Then it also helps it will also help you, because when the SRO reads your letter of intent, it will get back to you and say, maybe you shouldn't apply because of this or some things, which, it's like when you're a mechanic and you are applying for the job to do a bricklayer. This is so, don't mind my example. So they will advise for that. And then some, they will tell you that even though it's encouraged, letters of intent are not required. But they may say, oh, they encourage it. But you want to take advantage of that to at least introduce yourself to the program officer, and sometimes you can schedule meeting and say, look, this is what we intend to propose, and all the rest. How do you see? Do you think it's responsive to the RFA? The study session is not where that comes in. Even the SRO does not know anything about letter of intent, because the applications have gone past through that stage. But the applications usually include your BAU sketch. How many people have heard of BAU sketch? NIH BAU sketch? So in your BAU sketch, you have your publication, and then there's a link to your publication. So the reviewer is able to go and share, okay, you are proposing, this alternative medicine to this. We want to know, is there an area that you have an expertise or not? So that's where that information is obtained, and, that counts towards the outcome of the review. Any other question? Okay.
Don't they use the LOI to trim down the number? They have so much.
The what?
Don't they use the LOI to trim down the number? They have so much application.
If they have so much application, no, they will just look. Except there's something wrong with the application, all the applications will go in for review. It's at the study session that the study session will decide that, okay, we are only reviewing 50% of the application based on the initial score. Because the initial score by the reviewer, you take the top 50 and then the remaining. So those one will now be the ND. What is ND? Not the score. Yes, if they are volunteers. But yeah, they are volunteers. But let me put it this way: they do pay little, which is nothing compared to the time that you put in. So, like you sit in for 3 days, maybe you get $300, depending, So, but that's nothing compared to our time. Professors. Yeah, because it's not just the day that you attended the study session that you committed into it. Because you have spent time reviewing applications, you read maybe 2-3 times. And that brings that. I know they may have covered that. I don't want to dwell so much on that when you went through grant writing. If your aims page is so confusing that the reviewer reads it and it doesn't get sent, you're already getting poor score. Because a reviewer should be able to be attracted reading your specific aim page. It should be so clear that this is what you want to do and not read. Because otherwise, more or less, they're just looking for reading it is looking for reasons why they are going to score you low. So that's why it has to be clear. And then your publication, if you've not published in that area, it becomes difficult for you to make a justification that you are an expertise in that area. So if you are going to be doing pharmacogenetics and all that you'll be doing is literature review and all the rest that you survey, or maybe prevalence that you'll be publishing on. It becomes difficult for you to convince anybody that, okay, the millions of dollars that you're asking for, you'll be able to do what you are proposing. That's not your area, and then you don't have other expertise. Even if you have other expertise and you are the leader, it becomes difficult to convince the reviewers that you'll be able to lead in an area that you don't have an expertise. And then, sorry, one other thing is that you don't just suddenly assemble collaborators to respond to RFA, because what the reviewers will say is that you don't have evidence of prior collaboration. Let's listen to his question, please, or comment. Sorry, let's listen.
The basket submission, will it be for the whole thing or just the PI?
Everybody that has significant effort in that application, that is, though even the consultant, because there are some that you regard as consultant, they are not, they don't have effort that is regular educationally, but you pay them, they get, paid, not salary, but kind of maybe lump sum once in a year or something like that. Everybody has to submit a basket.
So for the publication history, is it just they will check for the whole thing or for just the PI?
Everybody, because that is also in the basket, because when you assemble the team, each person is coming with specific expertise. Take, for example, the pharmacogenetics, you have maybe a statistical genetics, you have the wet lab genetics, you have this and that. So everybody will be assessed based on that. Otherwise, there will be a vacuum that will be recognized or observed by the reviewers and say, look, there's a weakness here. And because of this weakness, we don't think this project will be successfully executed. Because if it's not successfully executed, what happens? You wasted the money, the resources. And so that's why. You want to ask a question? Sorry, somebody is talking here. Shall we listen to you? Okay. Yeah, publication is usually the easiest and the best to demonstrate prior collaboration. But there are other methods that can be used, maybe, conference presentation or some MOU that, are in existence. Let's say, my university actually has a program at your university, which is kind of agreement between the two universities. That's evidence of collaboration. Other means can be used. But it's always because, you want to convince the reviewers that what you are saying is kind of valid, that it's not like, okay, you just suddenly assemble people and say, come and then let's present ourselves. Because it's also not easy to collaborate, you have to understand each other, and there has to be evidence of successful collaboration, especially if you're asking for big money for RO1, projects. Yes.
What if the collaborator sends you maybe a support letter? Maybe going to support the advising the site work.
Everybody, apart from even the co-PI, if you have multiple PI, only the contact PI will not write letter of support. Every other person will write letter of support. So the fact that you are named as a personnel on the grant, you submit your basket and letter of support. And that's where you write and praise and say, look, we've been doing this together, East Africa, So you have to write, everybody writes and submit letter of support. Yeah, that is my data. Yes.
Okay. That is collaboration. I think we have a team of 8 people. And it happened that only 3 have a direct collaboration,
other team also have their private collaboration. So just kind of like a mix collaboration.
Yeah, that's allowed. That's allowed because sometimes it's not everybody, you know, but there has to, what I was trying to say is that it doesn't have to, it shouldn't be that no two have ever collaborated or worked together. There has to be evidence that even the paper that you may want to say, oh, our prior work, it's possible that only 2 out of the 8 actually have written together. That's also allowed. If nobody rises during the review and said, I noticed this, and then everybody dances towards it. Any other question? Okay, let's move forward.
All reviewers to please submit their final scores. Remember to hit save. Are there any comments on the budget?
I think budget is quite acceptable.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. How about the authentication of key resources?
So the topic has been addressed, and also the resource sharing plan is thorough and acceptable.
Yeah, I agree on both topics.
I agree as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll jump into a little debrief. So in that application, so yeah, people usually surprised by this. Each application, they are assigned at least 3 reviewers, often more, based on how complicated the application is, how large it is, what type of research they're doing. All the panel members who aren't in conflict, we have access to the application. They can read it. They often do if there's overlap with the field, but everyone is able to participate in the discussion. And this is an example. It seems far-fetched, but it's not that uncommon where a reviewer sort of focused in on the application. They only see a couple of weaknesses, they give it a pretty good score, but then each reviewer has non-overlapping weaknesses. So when someone sits back and hears a discussion, it's like, wow, you're saying 2 and 3, that really sounds like a 5. And this is very important for score calibration, and it's another reason that we have a discussion. I mean, everybody will vote on the application as well, but you see that the assigned reviewers give their final score, and that sets the voting range. The final scores are 2 to 4. That's the scoring range all the reviewers will use. There is a process they're able to raise their hand to say, voting outside the range. They're often asked to give a reason why. 9 times out of 10, it's because the comments don't match the scores that we're hearing. We didn't want to go to that today because of the comments. But there is a process where assigned reviewers set the range. Other reviewers can vote outside the range.
Brian, could I just ask you to comment really quickly on the extent of the discussion for each application?
Yes.
Did we abbreviate it for the session, or is this really what people are getting?
That's a good point. Yeah, number of questions. This is an abbreviated version. I would say for R1 applications, anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes, depending on the score range. If the score range is very close, it'll be quick. Sometimes they'll have, 227. There'll be a long discussion of that. So this is a very abbreviated version. They go into more complexity. Go a lot more depth. Not just for R1, but if it's a clinical trial or a program project, they'll have a lot more time out. So yeah, a number of questions on that. This is an abbreviated version. Okay. So for the sake of time, I will turn it back over to the chair for the third application.
Okay, we now have our third and final application. It's from Dr. George McPhee. It's entitled A Clinical Trial Examining Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Opioid Use Disorder. Assigned reviewers are Drs. Carlin, Marmelo, and Shen. And could those assigned reviewers please give their preliminary scores?
Yes, I gave it a 3.
I gave it a 6. I gave it 6.
And I think we should have one more reviewer. Well, in any case, we have a bit of a range. Carlin, can you please start your review?
Sure. Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yep.
Great, thanks. So this application proposes what I consider to be a highly novel use of cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT, to treat opioid use disorders. In the design, CBT or sham treatment will be administered to participants at a single clinical site who meet the DSM-5 criteria for opioid use disorder. The participants will have follow-up interviews at 6 months and 1 year to assess opioid use. There have been other studies that have examined the effects of CBT on opioid use, but this application proposes what I think to be a novel treatment plan that is based on a recent paper that has some very exciting results. The paper also indicates that longer CBT sessions may have a longer lasting effect on opioid use. The application is clearly written and the PI is a leader in the field. All of the review criteria in the RFA that are specific to clinical trials have been addressed and the study protocol has been included and it is clearly written. The study timeline is feasible and well justified. Challenges and proposed solutions were adequately discussed. The experiments are sufficiently powered, including detection of sex-based differences. But my score would have been better, but I have concerns with the control sham procedure that they will be using. And I thought that they could have included more information on the training of personnel at the clinical site. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And so I agree with most of the strengths and weaknesses stated by Dr. Kalin. However, I gave a less favorable score because I believe that the investigators have misinterpreted the results from the key paper they are citing. My concern deals with the rigor of the prior research. So the investigators interpret the results of this paper to show that the new treatment has a longer lasting effect. However, I do not agree with this interpretation because it's my opinion that it's really unlikely that the new treatment procedure will have any added benefits. Therefore, the hypothesis is flawed. And this was a major score-driving concern for my review.
All right, I'm the reviewer. Sorry, I was muted just now. So I actually agree with the first reviewer, Dr. Allen, and I also gave the initial score of 3. And I respectfully disagree with the comments of Dr. Bamidele. I believe that the rigor of the prior research appears to be very solid.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to open this up to the full panel.
So, while I wasn't assigned this application, I did read it out of curiosity. So I agree with Dr. Marlowe that the intellectual foundation of the application is extraordinarily weak. I didn't understand the results and the implications of this paper.
So we had a fairly substantial range of those preliminary impact scores. Would the assigned reviewers like to address the issue of rigor of the prior research? We're sort of dancing about this.
So I saw the comments and the critiques from the other reviewers, and I even went back and looked at those papers. I think that the PI's hypothesis is still based on scientifically rigorous arguments. Even if there are some concerns that this experienced PI and team will be able to address the issues and move forward based upon the pitfall and backup strategy, I still think that this application sufficiently will be productive.
Yes, thank you, but I respectfully disagree with your assessment.
Okay, it appears as though that our reviewers are not going to be able to come to a consensus. Dr. Kelvin, do we need to keep going, or can I reach a consensus, or can we stop here?
Okay, now for a final poll question. The reviewers cannot come to a consensus on the merits of the application. Does the review continue, or can the chair cut it off? The question is, I'll phrase that way, sorry. Do they have to come to a consensus on the merits of an application? Yes or no? Yes, they have to. No, the reviewer can stop.
So they don't have to come to a consensus.
Okay. So a little more clear here. So 72% say they do not have to come to a consensus. We'll see what the SRO says.
Sorry, sir. No, the review process is not to come to a consensus. But there are times that you can come to a consensus, like the one we saw that they had 4, all of them eventually 4. But oftentimes, no, that's why you have the range, because the expertise and the views and what you agree on, and it's not like the reviewers are defending, but you are expressing, So it's allowed. It's not to actually come to a consensus, but if they are able, that's fine. Yes.
The report that goes to the advisory council doesn't go in everybody's score or the summation of all their scores.
Oh no, it's just the overall. You know, the first video, we saw how that is average for each application. So that's what goes there, and then the percentile, whether they made it or not. Because even though those among those who that I discussed, it's not everybody, because the pay line, which is defined by the percentile, only those that make the percentile, or those that the program, the institute or IC identify as priority, even though they may have scored poorly, but they could be picked if they think that, oh, we are so much interested in this, because they made the announcement, they know what they want to fund. But then it does not mean that somebody who has made the pay line, who has been scored, excellently, will be dropped. That will also be funded, but somebody could be picked from the web and say, you come to solve this.
Okay, in that case, will the person have the opportunity of modifying the proposal?
Oh yeah. So that's very good that you brought it up because I would have missed it. Sometimes, to fund such, the program officer will contact the applicant and say, can you address these concerns that actually brought the score down, that made it poor? Because those concerns that the reviewers actually raise have to be addressed. Okay, you say this person has not been doing this and that. It's okay, you respond to this based on the response. Because if you are contacted after you scored poor and they say, oh, can you respond to this? Then you want to do your best, because what that indicates is that you are likely being considered for funding. So you now say this, you can say, okay, even though we propose to do this, based on this, and this is how we can mitigate this concern or address this concern here. That's usually, it usually happens.
Okay, so in a situation whereby there are different, there's kind of a white card, like maybe someone picked 2 and the other person picked maybe 7 or 6, and still both of them are still trying to say that they are not agreeing on this. Will it be due to the lack of expertise of some of the reviewers in that area, which they might not want to disclose? For instance, we submitted a kind of a letter to the editor for a journal, and then one of the reviewers was asking for us to use background method, like just that was
formatting.
Yes, formatting for a letter to the editor. So those were the things that he pointed out, such that the team, as in, didn't even bother to respond to such, because that was the person was already now as well what should be in the letter to editor. So for stuff like that, we might not be there because the journal keeps telling us to respond. Now, all we could have just said is not applicable or something. It's too short. So for situations like that, how do you handle such situation? Because you won't be there.
You can't handle anything. You can't handle anything because you are not there. So what you do is a summary report that statement that you receive, but it's a little bit different from the publication protocol and other. But keep in mind that it's not just the 3 reviewers that review your application. There are others there. So if it's just one person that is insisting, even though that reviewer or that range has the potential of influencing the score of others because it defines the range. So somebody could say, okay, you say 7, then look at it and say, okay, I will stay at 6. Whereas if it were to be 1 to 3, I say, okay, let me just, pick 2 or 1 or 3. So that's the way. But if it's so obvious that this application is very good, and it's just only this one, during the discussion, it will be so obvious that maybe that singular reviewer is just an outlier. So others will vote favorably, and that will affect the overall final score for that test because it's going to be average. Okay, so let's continue.
The review panel does not have to come to a consensus on the merits of an application. The objective of peer review is to identify an application's strengths and weaknesses, and how those individual strengths and weaknesses are balanced to arrive at a final overall impact score. Reviewers may weight each strength and weakness based on their individual expertise and thus may arrive at different final overall impact scores. The objective is not to reach a consensus evaluation of the merits of an application, and all reviewers not in conflict should submit a score that is based on the discussion.
Thank you for clarifying this. Now, I think the scientific rigor has been discussed thoroughly. It appears that reviewers are not going to come to a consensus, so let's continue along with our evaluation of this application. And the reviewers, please comment on the protection of human subjects and the inclusion criteria.
Yeah, I can do that. They have trained therapists that will implement the CBT protocol, and all the necessary precautions are in place to ensure the safety of the participants. They also plan to recruit an equal number of men and women, and the projected minority recruitment is acceptable. Children will not be included in the study, but they have planned in place to recruit the participants from 18 to 85.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to now summarize the discussion in this application. The application aims to study the effects of cognitive behavioral treatment and opioid use disorders. The application proposes a randomized clinical trial for participants over the age of 18. All the clinical trial review criteria listed in the RFA have been addressed. The rationale for the study is based upon a recent paper which may indicate beneficial effects of longer therapy sessions. However, reviewers did not agree on the interpretation of the results of this key paper and how much those results would support the application's hypothesis. Therefore, the evaluation of the merit appears to be very widely between these side reviewers for this application, and with their final scores, I think we're going to find out just how wide a reception that is.
So for my score, I'm going to stick with a 3.
For me, I still have a major concern with the concept of a flawed hypothesis, and thus I'm still at 6.
And I am going to stay at a 3.
Okay, thank you all. There are two very differing perceptions on the merit of this application. As each of you votes your conscience, I would encourage you not to split the difference, but to rather be decisive and align your scores towards the perception you found most convincing. Are there any comments about the budget?
Yes. I felt that the budget is excessive for the amount of work proposed, and the percent effort from the personnel is too high, and they overestimate the cost. Can we lower the budget in this application?
We can make recommendations on the budget for NIH staff. Do you have specific recommendations that you would like to make?
Yes, in this case, I would recommend that the personnel request for one of the technicians be eliminated, and that the supply budget be reduced by $50,000 a year.
Do the other reviewers agree?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I will make note of this in the final summary statement, and please make sure that those comments are included in your final critiques as well.
We have some comments about the authentication of chemical and biological resources.
Yeah, authentication is not really applicable for this application. There are no biological or chemical resources that need that.
Okay, thank you. And can the reviewers address the resource sharing plan?
Yes, this application does not address this topic, and thus it's not acceptable.
Okay, do the other reviewers agree with it?
So resource sharing, what that means, because NIH is funded by the taxpayers' money. So the result of any funded project will have to be made available to the taxpayers. So which means the data that you generate, we want to share it with the public because the public paid for it. So, this funded it belongs to them. So you have to explain, discuss how you will share such data that you generate, or if you develop an app or software, how you make that accessible. So sometimes people, reviewers may find your explanation, your plans not acceptable. And sometimes, it may be absent. That, also comes up during the review session.
So is it the same is unacceptable, the plan that was put in? Is that what we saying?
Yeah, that's the plan for the resource sharing. What the applicants proposed that they would do. So he is saying that that is not acceptable. Yes.
I realized it after they give us score, then they are asked about the budget and the resource sharing. So is it that those aspects do not influence?
Those ones, they don't influence the score, the impact score. But, they have to be considered, they'll put it in their report, that will be discussed. If it's funded, like the cut in the budget, the program officer will take care of that and say, but, the program officer will go through and discover that maybe he or she does not agree with that. If there's a justification, the proposed budget could be awarded, but otherwise, what is suggested or recommended is what they would do. But it has to, if it's raised, then it becomes a problem that the program officer has to address. Any other question? Okay, let's round it up.
Yeah, the resource sharing plan is not interested.
And yes, I agree with the other two reviewers.
Okay, I'll make note of this on the final summary statement. Please be sure that these comments are in the appropriate section of your critique for this topic. And so this will conclude our review meeting today. Thank you very much to our chair for moderating the scientific discussion.
Okay, so this is the end of this session. But before we go for break, let me just also remind you that all these will actually be read by the applicant, because it will be in the summary statement. Because whatever the reviewers put in the report, in their critiques, which they've been asked to put, the applicant will see. But you won't, the name of the reviewer will not be in the summary statement. You won't know, but you see the roster, the names of those who attended the study session, but you won't know who reviewed, who reviewed your application. You won't know. So that's very important. Like I said, you receive a folder that contains applications. You already have 2 applications. Oh, one. Okay, I gave you just one. Okay, you have one which I say you should read. When we come back from break, we'll go through that. We want to see, what you glean from that, and then in the folder, you will see the summary statement for this application. And then I also put other applications that you can read and see the summary statement, just to actually provide you more knowledge or information about the process, and also I have 2 other things or resources there that you can use regarding your specific aim, in addition to what you've learned before now. I put 2 other 3 papers that I strongly advise you to read. I put it as reading for reading or reading materials. One has to do with study design, the type of study design for biomedical, and 2 other ones are very kind of classical papers, not too long, at your leisure time. I couldn't print everything because that would add excess login to my login, but since you are going to have the PDF, you'll be able to read on your iPhone or iPad. So please make good use of it. Okay, so thank you very much. I think from the NIH And that's why you have this declaration. So, page 2, which should have the number page 32. In the previous week or so, I want to believe that you discussed what is referred to as specific aims page. Okay. You know what that involves? What should go into your specific aims page? You go through your lecture. We are not going to go through that, but part of the resources that I have here, you will see a complete page that has a breakdown of what your specific aims page should be. You know, what it contains, you know, how you move from the beginning to the end, and have a flow of the idea where you identify the gap before the gap and all the rest, and then how you intend to fill the gap. Because if there's no gap, then there's no need for that study. Okay. So the same way, when reviewers review application, we start with the specific aims page, go through and see what, you know, the issue is all about, which, you know, you want to know the gap, how they propose to fill the gap, what will the study actually add to the knowledge, and then you see how they plan to do that, which you now have the specific aims. How many aims do they have here? 3. Okay, there are 3 specific aims. And you see in aim 1 it says to define the role of post mismatch repair proteins in polymerase replication and polymerase induced DDR activation. I was going to ask yesterday, you know, well, after the introduction, I think we were able to resolve that not everybody here has medical background. We are not all clinicians. Okay, so that's different from stats. Okay, so that's why some of the terms of this application may be a little bit on the tough side for some to comprehend, but it's just as an example to see how ideas are developed and the flow of presentation. Because we're going to ask you, since you didn't read it, that has become, you know, impossible for us to do now, because we're going to discuss this application. But since you didn't read it, it becomes difficult for us to discuss it. But what we'll do in lieu of that is to go through the summary statements from the reviewers of these grants, hoping that hereafter you will take time to just read this application. There are other applications that are in the folder and the summary statements that you may want to take a look at when you receive the folder. Okay, so there are 3. So there are 3 reviewers. When you receive the summary statement, the first part of it will be a kind of a summary of the discussion from the study session. You know, the share of the study session kind of give a summary and then, you know, ask for the final score. But this one will be the summary. No, you don't have the summary. Oh, no, that's for the application. I'm talking of the summary statement from the study session after the review. You don't have it printed, but you receive it in the folder that will be distributed. Do you have it? Oh, yeah, this is the application. Okay, I'll give this to you later. I think they just printed 2. So the first part of the document will be a summary by the by the SRO, Study Review Officer. So for this application that you have, I will read the summary that the SRO wrote. The application will examine how polymer viruses control and destabilize normal host cellular processes to facilitate viral replication, and how these interactions may result in polymervirus-induced oncogenesis. The investigator hypothesizes that an activated host cellular DNA damage response, which is DDR, is crucial in facilitating virus replication and maintaining host genome stability during polymervirus infection. More precisely, the investigators want to determine how host mismatch repair proteins are required for polymervirus replication and DDR activation. The viral DNA structures that are recognized by the host and how antigen affects host cell DNA replication. The proposed work is considered highly significant. So all that, the first paragraph that I read, actually may have been taken from the application because it's a summary of the application. But now, the next one I'm going to read now is just the report from the study session by the SRO. The proposed work is considered highly significant and likely to advance the field and uncover novel molecular mechanisms underlying polymervirus replication and viral oncogenesis. Additional strengths include preliminary data indicating that viral replication rather than T antigen may be the key trigger for DDR activation. Cutting-edge approaches such as the primary human renal proximal tuboepithelial cell culture infection model, the accomplished investigative team that was the evaluation of the investigators. So that's part of the strength. Thorough consideration of alternative approaches. In summary, there is considerable enthusiasm in support of the investigator, the important topic, the highly compelling preliminary data, and the innovative experimental plan. That appears to indicate that they like it. And then there will be a kind of description of the study, which is kind of lifted from the application, like from the abstract or from the background. And then there will be a section which is referred to as public health relevance. NIH. The application, whatever you are proposing, has to be relevant to health. So for this, the public health relevance says polymerviruses are a family of viruses associated with severe human diseases, and a subset of them can also cause cancers. Our proposal studies aim to understand the interactions between polymervirus and the host DNA damage response to cellular pathway important for both viral replication and host genome maintenance. This research will have the potential to reveal novel therapeutic host targets to treat polymervirus-related diseases. So this also would have come from the application. Now, so after that, you now go to another session that will now say, will give the breakdown of the critique. But there's something there's something that I skipped. I didn't give you the impact score. So the impact score for this is 20. And the percentile is 2. So what does that mean from what I explained earlier? The impact score is 20. The percentile is 2.
So it will not be discussed.
It will not be discussed? No. You see, everybody disagrees. If it was not discussed, it won't have impact score. If it was not discussed, it will just say not discussed. You won't have a impact score and percentile. Sure, because it's 2. Percentile, what's the maximum percentile? It goes from 1 to 100. This one is 2. So even if the pay line cannot be 1, at the least maybe the pay line is 3, 5, 10. This one is 2. This one is within the pay line. You remember how I define pay line, because it's based on what the IC or Institute or Center has indicated that our pay line is this. So anything above that is not fundable. So, but this is 2. So it's within the fundable percentile. So it's a very good score. Then let's now go to the reviewers. Okay,
I have a question, sir. Sir, they are assigned the funding organizations will have a certain amount of money earmarked for that project. Meanwhile, now in a situation whereby the number that is falling below that percentile and it's more than what they can fund, but then the people actually feel that will they fund it, will they say we again and say we're actually successful, but we don't have enough money?
Okay, so what he's saying is that what if you have more applications within the fundable region that can be funded? Because in the RFA, that's what I said, you should read the RFA. The RFA will already indicate how much they are allocating and how many applications that will cover. So it could be that, okay, we have so million set aside for about 5 grants. So if you now have like 10 within the fundable percentile, then they will still be prioritized. I mean, it's like, okay, they may all be tight, but then that's where the council, the program officer, and the director will have to do a good job because the decision is not solely on percentile and impact score. You know, we mentioned the priority.
The budget.
Yeah, the budget is also part of it, and then the priority to the IC, the institute or center. So if they say among these 10, looks like there are 3 that it doesn't really matter what happens, we have to fund them because they actually address our priority, our interests. So that also emphasizes the fact that sometimes you may be within the fundable percentile and not be funded. But you don't want to be like Truth. the prime minister, after company, someone that saw you in died after many days. It was like that was a bad omen. So because you want a situation where if you successfully score a fundable, have a fundable score, you want want to pray that at least that is funded. It's not like you come back with a story. Yeah, but that's the possibility. Okay, so let's look at the reviewer. So usually reviewer 1 will come under critique 1. What you do, what will happen is that there will be that overall impact, which will express its own idea. First of all, it will describe, the project and all the rest. So, but we don't want to go through that. We just want to see what the reviewer considers as the strengths and weaknesses. The strengths of the proposal are the significant, are the significance because the investigator is in a strong position to make important findings that will be applicable to the DNA virus feed. They are clearly designed experiments to test logical hypotheses. In addition to the preliminary data, feasibility of the approaches is evident because the investigator and co-investigator have experience in the techniques. Experimental design is thoroughly described and expected outcomes are discussed. Even the possibility of results that disprove the hypothesis are discussed with attentive experiment and strong experimental design to test new hypotheses. There are a few minor weaknesses that do not significantly affect the overall impact and are outweighed by the significance, innovation, and hypothesis-driven comprehensive approach. So this reviewer score the significance of the project as 2. Score the investigators as 2. Scored the innovation as 2. The approach, which is the method and all the rest, as 2. And the environment as 2. So these are components of the evaluation, the scoring. Significance, the investigator, are they well trained? Are they qualified? The innovation, is this novel or it's just like a Me Too kind of application that they did it in Brazil? Nothing like that has been done here in this part of the world. That's the kind of a Me Too approach which you are not encouraged to take. Then the approach, that is the method that they are proposing to use, and then the environment. Because if you are proposing to do something that your environment does not have the facility or it is able to support you, that is going to lead to a low score. So, but we see here, this reviewer scored everything as 2. Then highlighted the strength. We are not going to go through that again. In terms of weakness, none. When you score high like this, and you now go to weakness and highlighted 1 or 2, then that's it's contradictory because you already gave a very high score that this is more or less close to excellent, and then you are now saying there are some weaknesses. So that is reviewer number 1. Let's see what reviewer 2 also has to say. And you remember that the chairman was asking about the protection of human subjects, because if the project involves human subjects, like you'll be having contact with participants, either as patients or as volunteers, you have to protect their interests, their privacy, and others. The plan has to be indicated there, and that is always part of the evaluation. if you are using animals, vertebrates, how they are treated and handled also will be evaluated. But all this but it's not all studies that will involve that. So when they don't involve that, you just tick not applicable. And then if the study will involve biohazards, you have to indicate whether the plan for how to handle that is appropriate or suitable or not. But if it's not applicable, you say that, and then there are times that you have to use some select agents. It could be a nuclear or something, and all those things, how those things are handled and proposed will also be evaluated. Then we talk about resource sharing, because it's taxpayers' money that is funding it. Then you always have to indicate how the resources will be shared or the outcome of the study. Then the reviewer will indicate whether that is applicable and acceptable or not. And the budget also, if there's any comment about the budget, or you feel that the budget they are proposing is too small, you can indicate. Because sometimes if somebody says, okay, we want to do some sequencing, and then the budget that they are proposing is too small based on your knowledge about sequencing, either human genome or host genome or virus and all the rest, you can say no, this budget is not correct. Either it's too much or too small, because the essence is we don't want resources to be wasted. So, but here is recommend as requested. Okay, so reviewer 2 scored for the significance is 2, for investigators 1, for innovation 2, for approach 3, for environment 1. So it's still, these are very nice scores. Remember, 1 is the best, 9 is the worst. Pardon? Oh yeah. It's excellent. And if you score 1, you also have to explain why you score 1. What are the things that actually stood out? The impact score driving factor. Like, so this is the reason. So it's not like, okay, maybe just to not waste your time, you put 1 or 2. No, you have to explain that. You want to ask questions? Yes, private organization can, but you still have to register with NIH. The organization will register and have June's number, and this pardon? Yeah. So that's why it's the organization that will now, apply for ERA number for you. Yeah. But if you have problem with your organization, you can always ask NIMA. They probably will guide. I'm sure. So the grant office will guide as part of this training. Or not all the institutions. Yeah. Especially if your institution has an NIH grant, then that means they have. Because there's no way anybody in your institution can be funded by NIH without you, or without that institution having registered or you having a ERA common. How many people have a ERA ID here? You don't have?
I'm not in college yet.
Pardon?
I'm not in the college of medicine.
Okay. So that means nobody here. Okay.
I do anyway.
Oh, you do? Okay. Otherwise, you just paste your paper, phone, and all the rest, for now. But please, find out when you get back to your institutions by going to your grant office. And then how many people have NIH BioSketch? One. You all have, but it's not everybody that is indicating. Are you? Pardon? Oh, you submitted it with your application. Yes. Is it the latest one that they submitted or? The latest one. It's not the latest one. So please, when you get back or when you have time, make sure you go and get the latest format, the NIH latest format, and combine that here because it's different from the old one. If somebody wants to collaborate with you and put you as a co-investigator in any application, they will require the latest format. I think starting from January this year, that was when they started or something like that. So that is very important. Okay, that's good that you have that. So we see that the reviewer 2 also scored the application very favorably. But let's read what he noted, if there is any, as a weakness. Okay. There is no weakness here, as stated. But let's go to reviewer 3. Okay, so reviewer 3 scored the significance as 3, scored the investigators as 4, the innovation as 5, the approach as 4, the environment as 3. So, of course, this reviewer will, it's a little bit, so, but let's see what he or she has to say in the explanation. Okay, I won't read the description, but let's see what the explanation. It says the proposed analyses are clearly articulated and are likely to be successful. That is important. Technical issues have generally been well considered and appropriate collaborations are in place, which make it likely that useful information can be developed as a result of these studies. A greater focus on the role of the DDR in cellular transformation through cancer development using BKPYV as a probe of these processes may have increased the medical relevance of these studies. I can't see any negative there, but let me see. Yeah, let me see. Okay, so that will be under the significance. So for the significance, the weakness that he or she identifies is BKPYV is not a major human pathogen when compared to other viral pathogens. Okay, then the investigator, say for the investigator, non-noted, which is okay because when you look at it, the scope for investigator, oh no, that's not very okay because if you have 1 to 3, that means you really don't, you can afford not to list any weakness. But 4 and above, that means you observe at least 1 weakness. Okay, then the innovation also, none noted, but the score for innovation is 5. So there should have been something noted under weakness for innovation. I mean, the reviewer has a long list of strengths for innovation. Then the approach, we have 4. So ordinarily we should see something listed under weakness. Oh, okay. Now there are 2 sets of weaknesses. So in M1, the hypothesis that both ssDNA lesions and DSPS occur on replicating viral DNA which serve as CDR activation triggers is proposed. Is it possible that BKPYV replication either directly or indirectly cause DNA lesions in the cellular DNA which are ultimately responsible for DDR activation? That's the question mark. The other thing is, when you review like this, you don't propose a solution. You don't rewrite the application by saying, oh, they should have done it this way. If they did, no. What you are reviewing is what they propose, whether you agree with it or not. It's not like, okay, you want to rewrite it for them that, okay, if you do it, like, unlike when you review manuscript for publication, you can suggest, do this. No, you don't do that.
So when we review proposals for exams, we actually propose solutions to tidy or something.
Okay, so but you don't do that for grant application. So that's something. But it doesn't mean that you won't find some reviewers that will do that. But the SRO will point that out, because the SRO will read all of this before the meeting and say, okay, can you restate this, do this and that. Okay, then the second weakness in M3, the investigator plans to elucidate the molecular mechanism by which polymervirus induces host genome instability. The model suggests that T antigen induced aberrant host DNA replication stress followed by mitosis causes chromosome damage. If true, viral DNA triggers that activate the DDR upon polymervirus infection may not be required for the DDR, i.e., it may be caused by T antigen affecting host DNA replication rather than BKPYV replication. Although, while BKPYV replication appears to enhance the DDR, then becomes less obvious unless there are additional viral protein RNA rather than viral DNA replication intermediates involved. This aim is not described in sufficient detail to fully appreciate the expected goals and potential outcome of the analysis. So, this is really pretty long weakness. Oftentimes, you just do bullets, details there. So, but at least we have some weaknesses here to justify the score of I think 4 there. Then the environment, which he scored initially, environment as 3. So we have there as no weakness for the environment, which is good. And then the human protections for human subjects, not applicable, that no human subject. Biohazard is acceptable. resource. Okay, now for this reviewer says resource sharing plans unacceptable. So no resource sharing plan is presented, and that is unacceptable. Even though it's not a score driving, criterion, but it will be considered because this will not be funded without the applicants responding to this. So it's one of those that the program officer will say, can you please respond to this point, this point? They will bring them out and say, please respond. Until a favorable response is provided, there will be no funding or confirmation of funding. But once you start receiving such, even if you didn't plan, you find a way to want to say, okay, this is the plan, because you don't want this type of minor thing to stand in the way of you being funded. Budget is recommended, and then as part of the budget also, there is a proposed timeline, because there are some projects, the maximum oftentimes is 5 years for R01, but R21, which are smaller grants, you have them as 2 years. You also evaluate whether the timeline that the investigator has proposed is acceptable or suitable. That is, can the study be accomplished from A to Z within the time? Because it's not all R01s that will propose 5 years. Some may propose 3, some may propose 4. So that also will have to be evaluated, but in this case, says acceptable. Okay. So you see, the reason why this is fast for us to review, for me to go through, is because you did not read the application. Because the plan was, we'll do it together, we'll ask you a question, but I can't ask you a question when you've not read the application. You were provided, but you didn't read it. That's there's nothing I can do about that. But meanwhile, what I want us to do in the interim is I will show you, a kind of what there is referred to as the anatomy or the specific aim page, which, I know you've gone through something similar. Was it your first week or second week? Oh, this is second week. Okay, but you've gone through, grant writing, specific aim. Okay, so let me put, so this one, critical appraiser. Okay, critical appraiser of scientific articles. You can appraise scientific articles. And then the next one is study design in medical research. They are short articles, but you'll find them very useful. The third one, which should be relevant to your group project, is types of study in medical research. Try to read them. You have things listed here. Okay, now what I want to show you is what I would regard as anatomy of specific aims page. So this is one of the resources that I picked from the NIH link page. I think it's there. So I'm trying to reduce this. Okay. Okay. So your specific aims page usually have the opening, and in that opening, which is from the beginning, your introduction, so to say, you have what is referred to as the hook. What is the research problem and why should we care? Because keep in mind, you are requesting for funding. So you come to meet me and say, oh, I need money to go and do A, B, C, D. Now, my question is, you want to let me know what the research problem is and why I should care about that. Why shouldn't I just take my money and go and buy a house at Lekki? Why should I fund you, or why shouldn't I fund some other person? So that's where you say. Then, when you state the research problem and why we should care, you also want to let us know the state of knowledge. That is, precisely explain what we know about the problem. What is the state of knowledge? Because that will lead you to whether there is gap or whether there are gaps or no gap. Because if it's not broken, you shouldn't attempt to fix it. Because if it's not broken and you are attempting to fix it, you're actually attempting to break it. That's it. So once you state where we have the knowledge and all the rest, and then you can now say, these are the areas where the gap, that is, what is the gap that needs to be filled? Hint, your studies should fill this gap. If you are not identifying any gap, then no study. Because you just don't do study or research for the sake of doing it. Like we said, we don't want the Me Too research. Yeah, others are doing it, so me too, I want to do it. No. You want to understand, identify that gap that needs to be filled. Then, the critical need. Explain why this gap exists and why it is significant. It is a significant problem. It could be a problem, but not significant. Especially to public health. So what is a problem in Akwa Ibom may not be a problem in Lagos State. But you have to make it flow that way with the opening. So once you move from here, now you want to answer the who, what, and why. Which is, that could be the second paragraph. Say, what is the long-term goal? What is the big picture for your work? The critical need from the first paragraph is to be the first step on this longer journey. And then the next thing will then flow into the main objective or the central hypothesis. There's one that I will show you that, these parts are like it. So you explain the first step. What do you plan to achieve with proposed study? If you are using an hypothesis or hypothesis testing framework, spell out your central hypothesis. That's the overall hypothesis. I don't know if you did some biostatistics or whatever as part of this training.
No.
Oh, okay. So let me bother you. That complicate issues. But you remember what we refer to as null and alternative hypothesis. Yes. Okay. When you are writing grants, what you use is the null, not the alternative. Because if you already know the alternative, why do the study? So you state it in the null format. If you are using that hypothesis, then the rationale, why do you want to do this research? What would be the possible, what would be possible if you are successful? Link your ideas back to the central needs, which is to fill the gap, which you already discussed and mentioned the significance. Okay. Then that is the first section. If you look at the application, so you discover that now we move to the aim section, because how many paragraphs do you have before the aim section? 2 or 3? 3. Okay, yeah. So it's always about that number. Okay.
I have a concern about the long-term goal. So they stated what their long-term goal is here, and I'm just wondering, stating your long-term goal as a simple objective like this, does this mean that this is what the person's entire career is going to be focused on?
What did he ask about the career?
That's why I'm wondering.
No, it's not about a specific career.
So what of this? When is your heart obsession?
Okay, on the Sunday, it's not your career. Yeah. Okay. So you now discover that you have those 3 paragraphs, and now we now want to look at the specific aims. So aims. The title for aim: write brief, active headlines that link back to the central hypothesis and main objective. Because if your aims are completely independent of your objective, that's a problem. Because there's supposed to be a flow from your central hypothesis and main objective through to the aims. Even though the different aims are not supposed to be strongly dependent upon each other. Let me quickly mention that the problem, I hope I'm not repeating what you've been told, but the issue is, if you have 3 aims, and aims 2 and 3 depend on the success of aim 1, that's a problem. Because if aim 1 fails, the project is dead, and that's just waste of resources. So that's why, as much as possible, you want to make sure that they are not completely dependent. They have to be related but not dependent. So if one, it's like when I was growing up, not too far, not that much. Yeah, okay. So I remember even on UI campus, there used to be these forever students. There's some students, they don't graduate. But that he had a C-strong. You know the car that they call C-strong? I'm not talking of the new model. Yeah, we used to say that thing can move on 3 tires. That if you remove one, it will still move. Maybe the way the engineers, constructed it. So that's what you want your project, your aims to be. That even if one aim fails, the others should still be able to stand and not be fatally affected. Otherwise, if they just depend on each other and one of them just, kaput, then that's the end of the project. So that's also, if reviewers see that, that will be a strong weakness and say, look, these depend too much on each other, because you can't. And one thing also, you also have to realize that there is no application or study that cannot fail. Because at the end, you should talk about weakness, possibility that this approach may fail. How will you address it? It's not like, oh, I'm sure this thing, you will be able to do it. It won't fail. No, nothing like that. Because to be scientific, everything is mostly probability. There's always that small probability of failure. You can't just say the probability of success is 1. No, it's not like that. So you want to recognize that and then say, in case this happens, we'll try and do this, address it this way. That's very important. So you see here it says hypothesis testing here should not be descriptive, i.e. avoid words like compare, correlate, describe, investigate, also known as look and see. Then needs-based. It is okay for the aims to describe what will be done. That's fine. Then supporting details. If the aim is to test a hypothesis, state working hypothesis, scientific approach, and expected outcome. If needs-driven, describe process for achieving the aim. So you see in the application that we have, there are 3 specific aims. And then after that, there is usually a requirement for a sentence or 2, which would be regarded as the payoff. Expected outcome, what is the expected payoff for investing in this proposal? There should be an outcome for each aim. Make it clear that this proposal will answer an important question, fill a gap, and advance the field, which you see that stated in 3 lines of 2 sentences, I suppose. Long one. So this is just an example. Also in the folder, you have examples of R01, R21, the smaller type of grants, and how that flows. So these are just for you to kind of be able to appreciate, how these things are written and how ideas actually flow. But it does not mean that, many of them are, they're nice applications, but you don't always come across nice applications all round. But sometimes the application could be a little, sometimes you could have an application that there's so many weaknesses that are identified, but for some reasons the program officer, like it and maybe agrees with what they are planning and their priority, and it could still be funded. For example, if maybe you are going to sample from an important population that the IC have actually been wanting to study, even though your aims may be a little bit lousy, but if they discover that, in terms of resources, that what you generate from the study will be, useful resources to the scientific community, then they can fund it. And sometimes they could convert it to collaborative, because instead of R01 is investigator initiated. That look, I just initiated, and you do it the way you want. But the collaborative one, which are the U ones, you are collaborating with NIH. So decisions are taken between you and NIH along the road, the way from beginning to the end. So when you read the RFA, you see some that are either you are training and all those other stuff. And then there are some that are specifically only for domestic, non-foreign. If they say foreign or foreign component not allowed, that means you cannot be part of it. Okay. Good. So that's any question regarding this. I will show another one. What was the time? Quarter to one. Okay, we'll see. We're doing fine. Any question? Yes, please.
Sorry, sir. I just need a clarification regarding hypothesis.
Okay.
And that we have null and absent hypothesis.
That's correct.
But I don't. I always keep asking myself, can somebody make like a hypothesis based on scientific evidences that we have that we are looking at the null aspect and the alternative aspect of the hypothesis? What I mean is that, for instance, in this application, if you look at the M number 3, yes, they said that here T2, like M cell cycle, M cell cycle, the DDI is out to prevent post-human instability caused by TAP induced of DNA replication stress.
Okay.
So, meaning that they are maybe probably they are using this hypothesis based on their knowledge on the scientific aspect of this.
Yeah, it could be based on the knowledge from preliminary or pilot study, and it could be based on just hypothesis, which means the null is that the opposite of this.
Oh.
So it's like you are saying that you hypothesize that there's a relationship between headache and stomach or hunger.
Based on that evidence.
Well, maybe you experienced it before. When you are hungry, you don't have anything. That would be preliminary. But if your preliminary data is not that sufficient to answer the question, why do we have to fund you to do the study? That is, if you have solved the problem, why are you coming to us to fund you to solve the problem? So that's why when you collect preliminary data, you have to make sure that it's not enough to be seen as sufficient for the entire project. And that's why pilot data or preliminary data oftentimes you just give direction or trend or nothing. In which case you can say, okay, if we collect more, we'll be able to answer this question. It's not like, for a study that you will need 1,000 participants. Already you are having 1,500. But if you have like 100, so yeah, we'll need this, but we study trend and not the rest. But think when we collect more. So in terms of hypothesis, like I said, you state it in the norm. If you remember your statistics, yeah, either Boston, I was trying to go back to secondary school. So you remember we state the hypothesis, the norm, and then the alternative, it is not. It's like, okay, the hypothesis is that average height here is equal to 50, maybe 5 point something feet. The alternative would be it is not. That is, but when you are writing for grant, you don't use it is not. You write it in the note that we have emphasized that the average height among 9-man fellows will be around this. Or if you want to make it one tail or two tail, let's say 1/3. That means one-sided. It is not more than, that means maybe Nama decided to burn. Okay, not less than, maybe Nama decided to go and recruit those who are tall. So we say the average height is not less than. The alternative will be, it will be less than or equal to. But let's not go too much into statistics. So that's the way it is for grant. It is the law that you want to, because it's positive. We can't want you to go and find negative answers. We can't want you. Nobody wants you to go and find negative answer. That is, you want to go and study that. Okay, it is not so. No, it is what you propose that the positive one that you want. You want to ask the question. No. I just say, okay, you want to say the hypothesis that we are related. What's your name? Okay. So if someone hypothesized that Idowu and Bamidele are siblings or sibs, so what would the alternative be? The alternative would be not. They are not. So the no is that we are related. The alternative is that we are not. Okay. So that's why I said I don't want to take you to about statistics now. Why I said okay.
So you have to not what we issue. That what we believe was actually about statistics terminology on gender and the
okay. So let's not go too much into about that. Since you didn't go through that yet.
We have been able to ascertain that you need at least preliminary data or a background of
not all applications.
or at least a background on what you are applying for. You can't just come from the roots and say that, okay, for instance, I'm working on breast cancer and then I just wake up one day and decide to send a grant for monkeypox and I have nothing that
okay, I see where you're coming from. Okay,
so my question now is, earlier you had mentioned that maybe the person just have reviews or prevalence studies or something and wants to do something for molecular analysis that may not really hold. So I just wanted to verify that.
Yeah, it's like, okay, let me ask you, if you visit someone's house and they say, okay, let's go and go down in a swimming pool at the back of the house, and you probably you are not a very good swimmer, and you didn't know how deep that pool was, and you just decided to take a dive and decided that you now discover that you need help to get out of the water, otherwise, will you want someone who can swim to rescue you, or someone who does not even know how to swim like yourself?
It is someone that can swim, but my question is, what if I have, for instance, reviews or systematic reviews on that topic, but do not have any preliminary?
Oh yeah. That also can fill in some gap depending on what you are proposing to do. Okay, the fact that you can describe how breast cancer is and what has been done and all the rest, actually does not make you an expert oncologist. Yeah, you do, which will fill the gap. But then also you may have a weakness for being able to lead the team. In which case, if the oncologist should actually be leading that team. So what I was trying to say is that if you are coming to an area that is not your expertise, reviewers will pick on that. That for this study to be successful without that this person has the required training. Because you see, we sit in the office or in this AC room and we propose another. By the time you get to the field, oftentimes things are different. The participant that you think will all be willing to participate and sign the consent, everybody is withdrawing and you have to take some decision and clinicians are not collaborating or cooperating with you. You need to make decisions. But since you don't have that experience, that will mean that it will take you a year to solve a problem that someone who has the expertise will be able to solve within 3 months. You are wasting that resources. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Now, bringing an oncologist on board as a team member.
Yeah, for this example.
I know. Just a follow-up to that question. Now, what if there is no track record between of the oncologist and the other team members? Will that one sense of the
So in some instances that would be okay if there are already some collaboration between the other members. You can say we recognize our weakness or the gap. That's why we are bringing this person on, and the person will write a strong letter of support. Yeah, but if among everybody there is no prior collaboration between any two, it becomes a problem. Sometimes you might be successful, but it's important to always try to see that at least there are at least two people who are collaborating. Yeah, but that may not work if everybody is from the same department in that university or the same university, because that's already CDC. But it's just that they will know that it doesn't. You don't have any evidence that you worked together before, because even twins they do quarrel and disagree. So to work together oftentimes it's not easy. So they want to see that the ability to work together or inability to work together does not impede the progress of the project. Yes, I'll come to you.
So at this point, so the idea came from somebody else who does not have the final expertise or total expertise to do that project. And so you need somebody else as the peer to help collaborate or help coordinate that. When you are sending it in, who sends it in? What's that process going to be like? So the idea came from somebody else. You know that you want to be part of this. You know that someone that there's a gap that you think you want to fill, but you don't have the total expertise. Like you need an oncologist, like a bush. So how does that work?
Okay, so there are multiple ways of addressing that. They can go in as multiple PI. Both of them or three of them could be the PI, but there will be contact PI. That person can also remain as the contact PI. So in the plan, there's the PI plan for multiple PI. You now say this person will be responsible for this aspect, this person will be responsible. So each PI has his or her own role, and putting everything together makes a whole. That's why they are using that mechanism. Otherwise, it would just be an individual that is the main PI. Others are co-investigators. So it could be multiple PI, and it can go through the person that came up with the idea. Because the person, keep in mind, your application is not just going to have one aim. multiple. So it could be that the other aim is where that person has a strong background and will be able to direct well. But this other person who is also a multi-PI will also be able to direct other aspects.
Thank you, sir. On this, under hypothesis testing, that is, the aim should not be descriptive.
Yes.
Avoid what like compare. I don't understand because in most cases that's how I see aims being stated.
Yeah, what they are saying is that you want to avoid, making it descriptive. Like this will correlate this and that. You make it more sound like scientific because all that the way they present it is as if you are describing, whereas you are supposed to state the aim. It's not like, okay, let's look at this first aim. So aim 1, it says to define the role of host mismatch repair protein in polymer virus replication and polymer virus induced EDR activation. This is simple enough in the sense that, then he now explained what that means. But sometimes what some people present will be the explanation instead of this short aim or the specific aim of what you want to do, because aim is like, a title, so to say. Yes, please.
Looking for this aim 1 that says to define the role. What is the role to identify the role?
Pardon?
What is the role to identify the role as opposed to defining it? Okay, to identify the role.
So that's where grantsmanship comes in. That is, the choice of your term, the choice of word, and etc. And sometimes, some of us, we miss school when the English teacher So what we could describe in 1 or 2 words, we may end up describing it in 10 words. So it depends. So you are right. It could be a better choice of word. And that's why when you finish writing, always take a break before you read it again or give it to a lay person. Because what happens is that when you read it yourself, what you are reading is what is in your head, not what you've written. So that's why, later on somebody reads and says, I didn't see this typo or this error, what does this mean? Because you're actually reading what is in your head, which is not what you've written here. So if somebody, maybe your wife, your husband, reads it who is not in this here and then asks you a question, you'll then be able to say, oh, this and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's why grants is not something that it's not a crash program. It's not like a fireman business. It takes time to first of all generate the idea and write it. It's not something you say within a month. RFA comes out and the deadline is next month, so we'll be able to do it. Let me not deceive you. It's not always, you have to prepare for it. It takes months to really be able to put the ideas together, articulate it and write, and then you are also collaborating with people asking, because I know that here we want to do a program in another 1 week, we say, oh, this is the day. Things don't work that way because they are scheduled, things that are scheduled, and then the idea may not flow that way. Because what you think is the best idea, and you write it and you give it to somebody, and the person, is either with his expertise or doing it from a different perspective, and then points to your weaknesses, that's when you know, oh, I didn't look at it, I didn't think about it this way. So it's always good to share, and that's why, I don't know if they told you that you can, the groups that you have now, it's not only for this place. You should actually try to maintain that group and beyond what you learn from here, try to maintain the collaboration. So that, for example, one of you or some of you may already have data in your drawer that have been there for maybe years. Now you can think of maybe doing the analysis and writing the manuscript with even those members they will contribute, and before you know it, if there are 3 of you like that, 3 papers will soon be out of that. It's part of what the growth out of. And then you can contribute in terms of small grants. Any other question? Any other question? Okay. Oh yes.
So I think for me, one of the reasons I found it difficult to read because it wasn't my
Your
subject
field,
area,
yeah.
and then I was like, I don't know if
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. But they put a diagram figure here, oftentimes that is not necessary in ink page because that takes a lot of space. Oftentimes you are out of space because the ink page is not supposed to be more than that one page. Because that one page, that ink page does not count towards the maximum of 12 pages for R01. For R21, I think it's 6 pages. So their limit, for each listing, their limit to the number of pages. So the format is okay. And then when you go through other ones that are put here, you also see how that is. So there are page limitations and things that are required, etc.